What's up, everybody? Can you hear me? We had a little technical glitch, you could call it. We're meant to start in 30 minutes from now. As you can see, a little, oh wait, hold on one second. Cool. A little different setting. I'm actually in Dubai. Took a little vacation here for some work. Rafi was managing the live stream by mistake. He clicked go live, so we started early. Not his fault. I should have been more specific in my directions, but here we are live 30 minutes early. I see Rafi's here. Rafi, are you ready to come on? Rafi, what's up?
How's it going? I'm good.
Good. Look, I got to run, but if Malkon can come on now, let's just get started early. All good. Whoever goes in 30 minutes will miss the first 30 minutes, but they could always catch up later. If we end the stream, we'll just need to send out a new link, and it's just too complicated at this point. So you want to try to get in touch with Malkon, see if he can hop on now?
Sure. I'll call him. Hold
on. Yeah, so I guess we'll just the formalities. Welcome, everybody. Today I will not be on the live stream, so whoever was tired of me for the past 2 weeks going live like 4 times a week, now you get a little break. Before we get started, a big shout out to our Patreon visionary members. We have Trivium Energy, PTY Ltd. We have SOG Cannabis. We have Max Marine. We have Geffen Posner, Adam Albelia, Maya, and our one and only champion member, Rajia. So a little bit about 20 Questions. 20 Questions is actually a show that was thought up by some of our community members. They thought it would be cool to just have a live stream where an Israeli and a Palestinian ask each other questions. I said, let's go for it. The first one went very well, so we decided let's just keep doing them from here on out. And I think this is probably our 5th, maybe 6th 20 questions. Malkon and Rafi did one a few weeks ago where they did 20 questions on identity. Today we're going to talk about solutions to the conflict. There's never a better time to talk about solutions like now. As you know, we just had a recent escalation in violence. Thankfully, we reached a ceasefire, but the status quo will always produce more violence. So we can't just accept that things are back to normal, because normal doesn't work. Normal will always bring more violence. We need to change the normal. We need to change the status quo. It's true that most people have very strong opinions about the conflict will now go on to their lives and continue doing what they were doing before this this little escalation. We will continue to be doing what we've been doing, and that's reconciling between people in conflict, trying to bring forth a nuanced and respectful dialogue and understanding of a very complex and multidimensional conflict. And yeah, we're just going to be doing it. Rafi, I do really need to go. I have
Sure.
I have a taxi on the way. Can you take it from here?
I'll do my best. Yeah.
What does Malkon say?
A couple of minutes I'll be on.
Okay, cool.
So someone wants to know who I am. My name is Rafi. I work in biotechnology in Jerusalem, Israel. A company called Synthesa Bioscience. We do DNA sequencing, mainly do NGS sequencing, like deep DNA sequencing. And as a hobby, I try to promote peace and dialogue between the Israelis and Palestinians. I worked on a project called the Eretz Ard, which is a land in Hebrew and Arabic. And we're promoting the idea of a federal solution for Israel and Palestine, which hopefully we'll have up on the Sulcha website soon. And what else? I am married. I have 3 kids. And someone asks, do you agree with the settlements like taking of people's homes that their families even built themselves? No. Like, which kind of settlements? I mean, my opinion on Israeli settlements, hopefully we'll get into that a little more, is in principle, I think, Jewish people should be able to live in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem and all over the place. And I support the right for Palestinians to live all over the land as well. I think under the current circumstances, I don't think Israel should be building more settlements because it'll just aggravate the situation. It's not really practical. At the same time, I don't think the solution is to, dismantle 800,000 people living in the West Bank. Someone asked me, do I consider myself left-wing? I don't consider myself left-wing or right-wing. I think both sides here are not being practical in regards to the Israel-Palestine conflict. In terms of generally in politics, if there was no conflict, I guess I'm somewhere in the middle. I think that economically speaking, you need to make somewhat of a compromise between how much you tax people and how much service you provide them. And someone asked me dismantle. So to dismantle all the settlements would be to evict 800,000 people. I don't think that's really practical. But in the meanwhile, I don't think that we should be building additional new settlements. Now, in terms of settlements that are already existing, building additional houses in the same neighborhoods so people can live, children can live next to their grandparents. I'm somewhat sympathetic, but I think we should obviously work towards some kind of solution now. Do I think that Jews in the West Bank should become citizens of Palestine and develop a two-state solution? I'm personally not so in favor of the two-state solution, as we'll get into. But yeah, if we had done the two-state solution, then yes, and then I would say that you should give citizenship to the Jews that stay in the West Bank, because it's not really practical to have them. It's not in Palestine's interest to have a whole bunch of non-citizens living in their country. That if they had, if let's say you had two states, they'd be worried about it, if let's say kids started throwing rocks at each other, all of a sudden the Israeli army has a motivation to go and occupy again the West Bank. So it creates puts a lot of pressure on the situation. If they were also citizens of Palestine and were protected by the Palestinian police department and stuff, that would probably be better. And it's challenging if you had entire cities made up of non-citizens in the West Bank. Let's say the city of Ariel became part of the state of Palestine. So you'd have this entire city where no one's a citizen. It's not the same thing as some people in the European Union, some French people living in a city in the Netherlands. You at least, in Amsterdam, there's at least enough native people in Amsterdam that they vote for, the government of the Netherlands, and they have a motivation to develop the city of Amsterdam. So if you had an entire city in the Netherlands made up of only French people, what's the motivation for the Netherlands to develop that city? And why, it creates a problem. So if you were going to do two states, yes, I would say give citizenship to those that wanted to stay. Could West Bank Palestinians be guilty of a crime and deported to Gaza? I'm not aware that happens. Maybe in extreme cases, but that's not how things are done here, as far as I understand. Hi, Rafi. It's nice to hear from you. Just imagine we got a federal state. Do you think we will have a new conflict about the country name? I think, God willing, that should be our biggest problem, arguing over the name of the country as opposed to arguing over whether or not people have equal rights. I think we got through that. I'm in our plan, we wrote the name as the United Federation of Israel and Palestine, but obviously people can, and Jews would probably just call it Israel and Palestinians would call it Palestine, because that's the culturally authentic thing for each one of them to do. How do I hide? Okay, cool. Is it true that young Israeli Arabs are being arrested in Jerusalem as young as 10 years old? If so, why? I mean, I don't necessarily consider the Arabs in Jerusalem Israeli Arabs, because most of them don't have citizenship. And as children as young as 10 years old being arrested, it can happen. I mean, Jewish children can be arrested if you're committing some crimes. I don't know what the legal ramifications are entirely. If you're a non-citizen in Jerusalem, I assume you still go to Jerusalem District Court and you get prosecuted under Israeli law. Let's say they threw a rock at a car and stuff. I don't know. So yeah, if you break, there's laws and you break them, you can end up in getting arrested. That can happen to people. On what basis did Jewish settlers claim the homes of Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah? Okay, so the situation in Sheikh Jarrah, as best as I understand it, is that the homes in Sheikh Jarrah were belonging originally to Jews pre-1948. There was a small neighborhood of Jewish immigrants, mainly from Yemen and some from Morocco, and they were living in this neighborhood. And during the war and slightly a little bit prior to the war, most of the Jewish population of East Jerusalem fled to West Jerusalem, and the Arab population of West Jerusalem fled to East Jerusalem. And so essentially what happened is you had a swapping of houses. And with the neighborhoods near me, like Malkha or Sheikh Bedar or Lifta, they were... Oh, I see Malkon is here. Malkon, can you jump on screen? So I was telling the story of Sheikh Jarrah. Maybe Malkon knows it even better. Add to stream. Oh. Hello, Malkon.
Hey, Mr. Director.
Ken, I'm the director today. I'm doing my best. I was telling the story of Sheikh Jarrah as best I understood it. So basically, the house used to belong to Jews in Sheikh Jarrah 73 years ago. There were homes of many people, like people I know in Malkha and in Karam and in other neighborhoods in West Jerusalem that belonged to Palestinians, to Arabs. They fled to East Jerusalem. The Jews from East Jerusalem fled to West Jerusalem during the conflict. And then these houses actually in question were destroyed during the conflict because they're literally on the border. They're right on the what's we call like the Highway 1, the main street down the middle of the city. And so these people who were left homeless from their houses in West Jerusalem asked permission for the Jordanian government to stay in Jerusalem. And they said, you could have this land. There's empty land near the seam line, what we call it now, like the edge of the border. And if you agree to write yourself that you're no longer a refugee, we will allow you to build houses here. And there was some funding. I'm not sure who funded the original building of these houses, but the land was empty. But it had belonged to Jews, or Jews had lived in these houses. They built houses and then lived there for several generations and grew up and, had entire lives in these houses. And now there was basically a building company, a contracting company that purchased the case of of basically the original owners, or the families of the owners of that property, to argue that they should evict the Palestinians there so they could build big condominium, fancy buildings there to put rich people near downtown. And obviously that's not really ethical, I think, in my opinion, because this is 73 years ago and you shouldn't be evicting people from their houses. If you want to compensate the Jews who lived in those houses, that's reasonable, but you don't want to kick people out of their houses over something that happened 73 years ago. That's not ethical. Okay, so let's move on to me and Malkon. Malkon, how are you doing?
What's up?
I'm good, thank God. So are you ready, Malkon?
Yes.
Do you want to introduce yourself? Should I? What?
Whatever you prefer. Are we already live?
Yes, we are live. We were live for 15 minutes already.
Okay, so we're doing this shorter a bit this time, 1 hour maybe, or we don't know?
Something like that, yeah. Let's do what we can. I have some questions. And Malkon, do you want to introduce yourself? Who is Malkon? Where are you from? What do you do for a living?
Sure. You already introduced yourself, that's why, right?
Yes, I introduced myself. People ask me who I am.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Malkon. I'm from the old city of Jerusalem. I'm a Palestinian Armenian Christian. I have a BA in psychology, an MA in human rights and international law, and an associate degree in biblical history and prophecy. Currently, I'm a geopolitical tour guide, and I also teach dance for human rights.
Fantastic. So I'll start with our first question. This is the question you didn't necessarily. It was about a guy named. Oh, that was our last video. Let's go ahead. Okay, the Mordechai Adar. He was on the show. He's a professor at Bar-Ilan University in Arabic, and he promotes this plan for the resolution of the Israeli conflict. I'm not necessarily a fan, but I wanted to ask your opinion of his plan. The gist of this plan was something like you would take the major cities in the West Bank, the major Palestinian cities, and Gaza, and each one of them would become its own sort of country, an independent country, and Israel would annex the land in between and in theory, give citizenship. How do you feel that as a Palestinian, does that fulfill your aspirations, or how do you feel about such a plan?
What do you mean by each city would be a separate country?
Yeah, it's called the Emirates plan. I mean, it's I can tell you my opinion. I'll jump to my opinion. I think it's very similar to what was done to the Native Americans in the United States or in the Bantustans in South Africa. This was, let's say you have Hebron and the area around it and the suburbs, and you said this is a country, the country of Hebron, and they have a Hebron passport. And they make negotiations between Israel and the country of Hebron. And then Ramallah and the neighborhoods around it is another country. And each one of these is a separate country in relation to Israel. And then Israel would annex the Jordan Valley and the settlement blocks. His theory is that regions has different tribal history and different culture. And they wanted to, and they rule under this sort of the Diwan system, right? They have these tribal councils, and they would sort of manage themselves like a traditional Arab society, like an emirate, like the United Arab Emirates, except disjointed and his tiny cities, like Vatican City or something like that. So that is his theory. Okay. What do you think about this?
What do I think? I mean. On multi-layers, it's not pragmatic first. Of course, it divides the Palestinian people into further segments, which is what we perceive the colonialist settler movement of part of what Zionism is about, which is to divide and conquer. So the more you divide the people, the more you can kind of be in control of the space, etc. I mean, it's funny. I don't I want to respond, but it just sounds funny. But yeah, it's just against what people are asking for at the very least. So we Palestinians are asking for our own. It's like dividing our family. So yeah, to say the least of this.
Okay. My opinion is that it is. I agree with you. It's classic colonialism. It's divide and conquer. That's what you would want to do if you wanted to maintain control of the country without losing demographic, authority. And if the Jews want to be the majority of the government and get to make decisions for how everything goes, it's much easier if they would break, like they did in South Africa. Essentially, there was something, the Homelands Plan. They decided that each major tribe of the Africans, of the Bantu people, would be subdivided into their own, state, essentially. It'd be their own country. Ultimately, no country in the world accepted these states as existing. I think they made 10 of them, and 4 of them were recognized by South Africa as countries, but no other country in the world accepted that. Sort of, Nelson Mandela was pretty clear that we never accepted any kind of partition, that's, and I would assume Palestinians would react similarly. I don't hear too many Palestinians opposing this plan, probably just because it's not that popular, that they haven't been aware that this is a thing. But among some Israeli peace activists or wannabe peace activists, this is like, oh, we'll do he really understands Arabs, so therefore this is a great plan. And I'm like, no, guys, this is what we did to the Native Americans, and in the United States, they 100 years ago they gave the Native American Citizenship Act already. It's like 1924. Almost 100 years ago. The Western world has moved beyond thinking that something like this would be acceptable. So I definitely think that Israel would lose a lot of support, and the support that's already being eroded with the past Gaza conflict in the West, this would not go well for Israel. So obviously, you don't hear a lot of support amongst official channels for this kind of plan. It's sort of an activist kind of thing. Okay, the next question is, what is the worst solution?
The worst solution? So still a solution, you mean?
Yeah. So if it's any solution, what's the worst possible solution you could think of?
That wouldn't be a solution, really. The word worst doesn't make it a solution. But the least likable solution for me is something that you just mentioned. Several countries, more divisions, more kind of weird autonomies. But second kind of solution that can be good, yet it's not ideal, is a two-state solution. It's not the best solution to live in two different separate countries. Most ideal would be to live all together in one country. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, if the question is...
But the following question was, what do you think of the two-state solution? That's next. But like, what do you think would be a terrible idea? I don't know. This is how we come up with this question here. So you think yeah.
Anarchy. Like, but those are not under the umbrella of solutions.
Right.
Those are, the question is tricky. It depends what you mean by it, Rafi. This is your question, I believe. Tara, you prepared it together, but...
Yeah. I think
so
this was Tara's idea.
Solution is a solution. So the
Right.
least likable solution, I think, would be like exactly what you just mentioned about the Bar Iman, funny professor. But other than that, I think,
some kind of, I would say the worst solution is some kind of...
Please.
Okay, I would say, either ethnic cleansing or any kind of apartheid regime. Like, those would be the worst ideas. Ethnic cleansing would be a solution, and apartheid is not the way we want to go here. Anything that's considered a crime against humanity is probably off the table, I would hope.
You mean, what is the fastest way? If you want to rephrase the question, to end the conflict? Yeah, kill them all. Or just kill all the Palestinians. Or just kill all the Israelis. Of course, I mean, funny answers like this. But that's not a solution. That's rather another
right
of dehumanizing our humanity and creating another form of conflict, which will not stop necessarily.
Okay, so the next one is, what do you think of the two-state solution?
Right, last thing I wanted to comment, just a quick story. I was, I can say it on live, although it's not very the easiest thing to say, but I remember when I was, I studied in Lebanon. So I was once called by the Mossad to become a spy. And so the Mossad guy was speaking to me in Arabic, broken Arabic. And he was like, yeah, you're a Christian, you're not Arab. You're with us. I'm like, sure, okay, sounds good, So he's like, we'll fulfill your dreams, we can like pay you to travel, to study abroad, and so tell us what you want. And I'm like, okay, what's in return? It's like, listen, we just want you to capture some terrorists, tell us about them, etc. At the time I was, very young, like I was pretty patriotic, but I didn't want to show it to the Mossad. So anyway, I tell him, listen, I believe in a certain guy. He was also Jewish, but he said something that doesn't really like help me go with this. It's like, which guy? Like, Jesus said, love your enemies. So even if the Muslims are my enemies and the terrorists are my enemies, I need to love them first. And he's like, oh wow, this is very noble. Listen, we kill them all first, and then you can have as much love as you can. So it reminds me of this type of solution. Let's kill all them.
Yeah, and we'll love them after.
Thank you for asking me first. You can, I don't have to be the one starting always first. I want to also honor you. But yeah, two-state solution, You want me to start first, or you want to start first? I don't want to, maybe.
Whatever you want. You could.
I want to give you like the preference.
Okay, fine. So my opinion on the two-state solution, I think the two-state solution, as people commonly imagine it, is unrealistic. Like the idea that I think it was Yair Lapid said, "I want to put a wall between me and you," and like he lives in Tel Aviv. People who live in the center of the country maybe don't understand what it's like for people in Jerusalem, or what it's like when you live near the border. You just imagine they'll have a giant wall, and when they go outside, they have their coffee shops. Most of the people are Jewish. It's like that's regular Israel to them, So they imagine this two-state solution: just put a wall behind the problem, and I leave it alone. But where you and me, we live in Jerusalem, and there's almost 1 million people here. You can't really separate Jewish neighborhoods and Arab neighborhoods, or the old city. It's already got a wall, It's unpractical, and people work and shop and go to school in all different parts of the city. It's not really practical to break the city into two countries. So if you want to have a practical two states, you're talking about two states with Jerusalem as a shared capital of both states. So that's an unusual thing. You don't have a place in the world where there's two states sharing capital. That's like one country. It could be something like Belgium, where you have like a Wallonia and Flanders, and they share Brussels, they share a capital. So I think that the closest thing to a working version of two states looks like Belgium. It looks like one country that acts something like two states. You could have an Israel, you could have a Palestine, you could share Jerusalem, and you would need open borders because you have people who would live in Palestine would want to come to Israel, people in Israel want to come to the West Bank, and you'd want to have. It doesn't make sense to have two currencies. Palestine doesn't currently have a currency, so you might as well have one economy. The Israeli economy is much stronger anyways. And then you would need all sorts of shared security arrangements to make this work. So the more you think about it and flush out two states, it ends up looking more like one country anyways, just made up of states and maybe a shared capital. So I think that's the bare minimum of what two states looks like that I would think would be functional. And I don't think personally that you could really evict hundreds of thousands of Jews from the West Bank. I don't think that's practical. I don't think we would do that and then get peace. I mean, once you say I'm going to kick all these people out of their houses, that's already, you're not going to do that first and then have a peace solution with open borders and a shared capital and all this sharing, starting with the big act of, segregation. It's cognitive dissonance. So you have to get in the mindset, I think, of living together, even in two states. It's going to be two states where they're very, very much two states part of one country or a confederation or something like that. So that's what I think a practical version of two states looks like. The classical opinion of two states, there's many problems. If you have Israeli enclaves inside the state of Palestine, the Palestinians are worried if two people start throwing rocks at each other, the Israeli army will swoop back in and take it over because they have to protect their citizens living in Palestine. So you need to have all these sort of shared security arrangements. They're in danger. It's not they don't necessarily want to have Jews around. They just don't want Jews to be an excuse for getting invaded, which makes sense. I wouldn't want to get invaded again. Israel is one of the world's most powerful armies. Palestine has no army. It's a not balanced situation. So you need to have more integration, and also with the economy. The Israeli economy is like the size of the Netherlands. The Palestinian economy is like Jamaica. It's a third world economy. There's big disparity. So you're better off having linked economy, linked security, open borders. So you're starting to think in those terms, I think, even in a two-state. So under that condition, if you're talking about two-state like that, fine. If that's how everyone's most comfortable, then I'm okay with it. Two states in a union together with open borders, shared capital, shared economy, shared security, fine. Like, at the minimum. What do you think of two states?
First, I want to say I admire what you said. And I think we don't have much difference in approaches here. Because I think we're both, at some point or another, we're both human-centered rather than physical, material, land type of centered type of people, which I think helps us see things closer to each other, kind of more similar. One thing I think I would add, I think it's good you started because I would have maybe stolen from you the beautiful stuff that you said. So it's good you also start first. One thing I would add is just because of the urgency of people being killed and people losing their lives. I would go for anything that would stop the emergency and the urgency against both peoples, but particularly the Palestinians. And in that regard, I would say even if a two-state solution would eliminate violence or a death of an innocent child for maybe a decade or two, I would favor that and waiting for the ideal situation. But that's for me the heart of this. It's if we really can just stop the urgent deaths and suffering and the abuse. But you're right. At the very root and at the very to root out the issue, we need to deal with human unity at some point and to live together, whether it's a two-state or one state that's open borders. Thank you.
Amen. So what do you think about the one-state solution? That's the next question. You sort of touched on that. How do you feel about the one-state solution?
I feel we should not approach it by forcefully pushing it. If two people don't want to live together, even if they're really immature and, sorry to say, stupid even, or one of them is abusive and the other one is a victim, or both are abusive sometimes and both are victims sometimes, but one is mainly victim, one is mainly abusive, they don't have to live together. Healing takes time. We have to give them separate rooms, separate houses, at least for a while. And that's where the two-state solution is a very healthy temporary solution for a while that can heal wounds and heal even narratives. The one-state solution is very ideal, and it takes a lot of emotional maturity and intelligence to access that. Especially with all sadness, I say it to your face as a Jew, beautiful man speaking here to me. Especially when the Jewish majority's priority is land and not human life. Their human life is important, but not the human life of another people group, which is the Palestinians. And in this regard, then the one-state solution, yes, ideal. But we want to have something like Norman Finkelstein says. International law, two-state solution, tack, apply law, get results, then, deeper, higher, bigger visions can come into reality. And then it comes maturely. In 2 generations only, my grandchildren or yours can be like, why even do we have to have borders? Or something along those lines. It's a bit more natural. I'm not saying time is the solution. I'm saying it also is one factor, but it's the education that takes place after. There's no suffering, there's no oppression. So that brings a whole different narrative and approach. And then, let's create something together. Like the 2 neighbors who have been fighting, or one is bigger than the other, abuse. They took space. Hey, I miss you, dude. After a while, hey, let's get together again. I'm simplifying it, but you know what I mean.
Okay.
What about you?
Okay, so my opinion on, I actually think the one-state solution is the most realistic, even though I understand what you're saying, that if it were easier to do the 2 states, I would agree with you. To save one life is to save the world, and do it now. But I just don't see it. I don't think it's going to happen because of the complexities of dividing Jerusalem, of all the settlers that are already in place in the West Bank, of the connection between the Palestinians and what's now we call Israel, and the connection between the Jews and what we call the West Bank and Judea and Samaria. I think it's easier for people to let go of their desire for segregation than to let go of their desire for the whole land. Because I think the desire for me to be connected to Judea and Samaria or to Hebron, I don't think that's evil. That's a connection. That's pure. I feel that this part of my history, this is a place I connect to. Being connected to a place is not wrong. Desiring discrimination, desiring segregation, that is what's wrong. And so it's, first of all, like what I said, the most realistic version of two states looks like Belgium anyways. It looks like two states in some kind of union. I would say even better, I wrote a plan with a Palestinian friend of mine that looks a little more like Switzerland. We divided the country up into states, into like cantons. Some of them had Jewish majority, some had Arab majority. People could travel around the whole country, and each side would have, you'd even make an even number of Jewish majority cantons and even number of Palestinian majority cantons, and you'd end up with a parliament that was half and half. And then they would have to balance each other. You'd have to make policy that was reasonable, and pushing, And so we decided about how the government would be. We sort of write a constitution. So I think that's the most ideal solution is something, and it's the easiest one. The way to get that to happen, in my opinion, is the movement to create such a solution is the healing. The healing when I say I'm willing to live with you as my equal and my neighbor, and both people are doing that, you've ended the conflict by creating the majority. Don't say do it by force, just make them in one state. That's insane. I'm saying convince the people that they would vote for it in a referendum, that we agree to do this. If you get 90% of people on both sides to agree, then we've crossed the bridge. Then we're there. I think I want to mention something. I know you studied psychology, like a Harville Hendricks, the Imago system for relationships. He talks about how it's about mirroring, right? Like when you do in couples, right? You say your truth, and then I mirror you, and I reflect what you said back to me, right? And the idea is that what your partner needs is where you need to grow, right? So this solution, where you grow, I heal. So the healing in this, when the Jews came here, they had the idea that they couldn't live with anybody. They were living under oppression all over the world, and they said that we can't take it anymore. We're suffering, and our only solution is to live in a country where we're in charge, because we can't live with other people. No one's going to treat us fairly. And then they came here, and because of this idea, it manifested that the Palestinians were like, these people are coming here and saying they can't live with anybody else. And then so they must mean they want to get rid of us. So then they started fighting, and they were afraid. So the Palestinians had these people coming into their country, and they were afraid that they wanted to expel them. So the Palestinians need to have the Israelis come in and not want to kick them out, and believe and that's for them to heal. And the Israelis, the Jews, need to have a place where you could have people who are not Jewish around you and don't want to kill you and actually accept you. And so by growing in this way, by doing this healing, we both get to grow as people. Where if you separate someone and say, yes, you were right, Jews can't live with other people, and yes, Palestine, you can't live with the Jews because they're going to want to kick you out. You're validating their fears instead of allowing them to overcome them and to grow. So that's why I like that. And there's a story in the Midrash. There's like a parable in when the story of when Jacob returns from his his uncle's house, Laban in Syria. He's returning to the land, and he runs into his brother Esau, his twin brother, who he had stolen the birthright from. And it's his twin brother, but he's got a whole army with him. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's hairier, he's more tan. He's scary. He separates his family, so he goes up front, and he sends messengers before him so that he wouldn't, to see if he wants peace or not. And so his brother, when he sees him, he hugs him and he kisses him. And his brother has this cloak, right, that he inherits from Abraham or something. The cloak of many colors that eventually goes to Joseph. And according to the parable, at least according to this parable about it, it's not literally in the Bible. And he throws it on the floor, and he says, "Ein shnei zarzurim b'anaf echad." There's not two starlings. Like starling is that really pretty bird that's like black, but when the light shines on it, it turns blue and green. I don't know if you see it in the spring. So you can't have two of them on one branch. You can't have two kings with one sharing one crown. So I'm going to leave. He went to Jordan, and Jacob goes to Israel. And in Jewish thought, when we have redemption, we have the Geula, where what we want to have is an ability that we can live on the same place. That you can have two kings and two people can shine in the same place. So I think by overcoming this fear that we can only shine by ourselves, it allows us to bring ourselves to the next level, beyond the level of I can only be strong if I'm by myself, but I could be together and we could have two people be great in the same space. So that's why I like the one-state solution. I feel like it's it's more spiritually fulfilling. It's holistic, and it's more exciting. I think it's something you get people more motivated about.
Okay. First, I want to say, Rafi, I love that you elaborated on this. I hear you, I see, and I can listen to your heart. I agree with you that realistically, it's actually more realistic to create a one-state solution. However, I will be saying things maybe that are the harsh realities.
Okay.
Which is, it is more realistic to live in one house as brothers than to divide the house. Of course, it's more realistic. It's even easier. It's more human. It's more loving. It's more humble. It's more hopeful. A lot of mores.
Yes.
And however, if one brother has more power to keep abusing, oppressing, mistreating the other brother, then the other brother has less power to claim brotherhood, and thus chooses to at least have a kind of a space, let's call it distance,
Right.
in order not only to heal. Yes, I spoke about healing. This is not a healing of two equal parties where both are suffering. And you know this very well. And unfortunately, we always have to state this truth, at least truth to our conscience as Palestinians, that this is not an equal party game where we need just to convince both parties. There is a party that has a clear agenda that we don't want to live with the Palestinians because of race. Not because the Palestinians have hurt us in history and we have Holocaust even, and we've been mistreated only or mainly by many other nations. It's because of race that has become very ingrained in in childhood among many Jewish people. And like being Jewish is like more special, more meaningful, more than other races around them, at least in this particular
reason. Once you finish, I don't know if I necessarily agree.
Yes. Bear with me.
Okay.
And there's a lot of elements that come into play. Religious. God chose us. God gave us the land. The Messiah is coming. This is some religious, biblical, some people how they believe makes them unique or not unique. Doesn't mean others are bad. It means that they have a unique mission here, more like different type of mission. Then there comes what Palestinian or not only secular readers, analysts of politics come. It's a colonialist mindset. The colonialist is somebody who's a thief. He doesn't want to share. The thief doesn't want to share the car. He wants to take it to himself. The thief doesn't want to share the money. He wants it to have it for himself. How to break the thieves or change his conscience into, like you're somebody who has like who speaks with a lot of beauty, but for a Palestinian or for the person who's living in the house, there is way more hope, and this is practical, pragmatic. There's way more hope in the victim's conscience than in the oppressor's conscience. Because the oppressor's conscience is in crisis. That's why he abuses his brother in order to gain his value. Whereas the victim's conscience is in crisis not because he's abusing, because he's abused by his brother, and he needs to heal from that. Not the other way around. The Jews don't need to heal from us mainly, we need to heal from them mainly. And then, that, when I say the Jews, I don't mean all Jews. I'm just speaking now in simple language. So I beg the listeners not to think I'm stereotyping. So, and that being said, I don't have my dependency when people ask me, why do you do all of this peace work with the Jewish people, with some right-wing, even settler? I spoke with Yishai, Rudy, etc. And why do you do all of this? I'm like, because I believe in being together, co-resisting together against wrong. And those people have awakened conscience. They're ready at least to speak, or they have some level of openness. And then, but they tell me, but do you think the solution is going to come from that? I'm like, to be honest, my hope is not in the conscience of my enemy. My hope that my people, the Palestinians, would represent themselves right, even to the right enemy who's open or to the closed enemy, because those principles is what gonna give us hope and revive us to change our own destiny, not to wait on the stronger to change our own destiny. There is way less hope in that, unfortunately. Less than 2% of Israelis are much open to hear me speaking, like you are. You are the exception. You are the unique one. This is true. Unfortunately, it's safe. So for me to battle 98%, no, I would focus, of course, on the Palestinian majority who want to battle it, but we will try to find together the right tool of battle, which I don't believe in violent battle. And I know I went a bit long, I know you want to say some stuff, but the right tools of battle in order to reach to a place. So, one state solution, you know what? For me, it's very healthy to cut off a relationship. For example, for me, Jesus says, if your brother sins against you, or mistreats you, or abuses you, go and speak to him privately, so that you may gain him back to you. If he refuses to listen, bring others, that he may be more influenced. If he still refuses, bring more. That's what Jesus teaches. Then he says, if he refuses fully, then treat him as a pagan, which means cut off your brotherly connection with him. Stay loving, but from a distance. He doesn't want you to be his brother, and you need to respect his free will. And that's where we need to deal. That's where the boycott, divestment, sanctions come in. They say, let's boycott the Israeli system. So put pressure and tell them a message. Hey, we want solution here. We are humans also with equality, and you're abusing us. And we're not boycotting you because we hate you. Oh, we're so hurt by you. Oh, no, we're boycotting the system, the regime, so that hopefully even those who are administering this regime would wake up to their conscience one day. But even if they don't, that the world would put enough pressure on the oppressor that the oppressor has, like South Africa, to follow the leaving, the seizing of the apartheid system. Unfortunately, oppressors throughout history, we do not have much examples of oppressors admitting their abuse, except maybe for Nazi Germany. And that's good for the Jewish people. I'm happy they recognize the Holocaust. Although Israel doesn't even recognize the Armenian genocide, which is before, or the Syriac genocide, which is before, or the Greek genocide, which is before, or the Palestinian massacres themselves that they themselves done against us, which is after, and others, and so on and so forth. And so I'm happy for one recognition by the oppressor, which was Germany. I would love Israel to recognize at least the others, which is not related to it, before they even recognize what they're doing to the very current Palestinians, that they're claiming they're killing their children because Hamas is hiding behind in Gaza. So there's a whole issue here about one state solution. I'm all for this. I'm a dreamer. I'm very positive. Dreamer, not in a fantasy, but I'm pragmatic. But I dream, and I believe dreams come true. But when I want dreams to come true, I also measure. Okay, what does it take for a one-state solution to come to be? It might come to be. It might be the fast solution. Maybe it will happen in a few years. I don't know, a few decades. I will not say a few minutes, but maybe it will happen suddenly. Oh, wow, suddenly something would. But for now, what I know, the most pragmatic thing is for Israel to give, at least under pressure, the right for self-determination for us Palestinians on the 1967 borders, even with keeping settlers and bringing a certain layer of how to deal with this checkpoint, borders, opening, closing, partial open, passports, no, yes, etc. And then go to the next phase, hopefully, after that into, okay, let's see now, can we build a new one-state solution? If the, sorry to say, I'm using those harsh words, if the enemy system the racist system of Zionism would say, no, we're not Jewish-centered anymore, or at least partially. We can accept others as equals. Okay, let's now integrate. We can have the United Nations of Palestine and Israel in the same border, in the whole of historic Palestine or historic Canaan or historic Israel, together and live together. We need to give it time, not before the healing of the oppressor. We need to give it time, because I can't force the free abusive will of the oppressor. And I can't also force the Palestinian to be healed. Although the Palestinians, even not healed, are way more open, some of them, to live with the oppressor if it's with equal rights and dignity. Because anyway, that brings them a high level of freedom and healing and dignity, which every human is aspiring for, which is what the human rights discourse is based upon, the whole concept of the right to live, the right to life, etc., etc. Thank you for listening to all of this.
My pleasure. So yeah, what I personally, like, I've met a lot of Palestinians. We even did polling, and I found that most Palestinians would accept, like you said, some kind of federal state solution. And I even found a large number of Israelis. I don't think that it's 2%. We found like 46% of Israelis agreed to a one-state solution that we proposed, at least as we proposed it. It was a huge number, a pretty relatively large number, and that was just the Jews. The Israeli Arabs all agreed also, the Palestinians in Israel. So I don't think it's that hopeless. So I'm hopeful that, I don't see a two-state coming to fruition. So I think that so I'm going to still keep moving ahead, trying to convince people to go and live in a one state together, because I feel like that's the ultimate direction we want to go anyways. So why skip over? Why bother having a temporary thing until everyone's ready to be mature? Just be mature now. Maturity now. So the next question is, did you find yourself unintentionally leaning towards two-state solution rhetoric for the sake of keeping peace dialogue? I guess you kind of think in terms of two states. So do you use this two-state rhetoric even though you think of all of it, of the whole country as historic Palestine? Do you say this is Israel, this is Palestine, even though you don't identify that way?
Rafi, before I didn't really focus on the question. I'm trying to comment on the percentage. One second. So to say 46%, I'm not even gonna say, oh wow, this is wrong. Of course not. Whereas when we speak about people who are open to one-state solution, we're dealing with an oppressive regime that needs very high resistance, very active resistance. Speak about people saying, yeah, one state. Sorry to make this like sound like, okay, sure, whatever. Well, I'm nice. Yeah, let's live. But they're not pragmatically, actively resisting an oppressive regime and just saying their opinion. Also saying 46%, where is that represented in the Knesset even? We don't even have 2% in the Knesset represented of a one-state solution. Like
Israel, our Knesset's terrible.
Bear with me, I want to hear. Even the leftists in Israel, they really like the two-state solution, because some of them culturally they don't want to live with Palestinians, and they say it out loud. I want them to live in peace, but I don't co-share with them, and that's the right. I don't co-share with them the cultural values. I don't need to live with my Palestinian neighbor who thinks if my wife is dressed up in a way, maybe I lack ethics, or vice versa. Palestinian think all of those issues of gender, dressing up, sounds small, but so what we're speaking about, like this percentage, wow, like I saw other statistics that say many people, 57%, prefer a two-state solution, and there's other percent said 87% want a solution. Like, I'm like, wow, I'm so impressed by the percentages, and I believe them, but at the end of the day, the bringers of solutions are the ones who are resisting oppression mainly, if not only. From the Palestinian side, so many people are not resisting oppression, but they're living as oppressed. So anyway, they are victims of oppression where the oppression needs to be stopped. Whereas Israelis, most of them are not living any oppression, and so them saying this or that doesn't have any weight, if they're not actively, except for the 2% that we have, according to statistics, few hundred thousands in Israel, who are actively resisting the oppressive regime of Israel, those are the ones who might bring about any change whatsoever. But go ahead. When I mentioned the Knesset representation of that, you wanted to jump in, so just to remind you of the point. Maybe.
Oh, sure. I mean, the Knesset, because of the conflict, the government uses that to sort of manipulate the public in a way that the only issues you're sort of focusing on is on the conflict. We have like the highest level of inequality or economic disparity amongst any sort of OECD modern country. We have like 37% child poverty. We have all sorts of other economic problems in Israel that get sort of divorced from reality because of these slogans. But when we interviewed people that like said they voted for Bibi. Literally, they voted for Bibi, and we within 15 minutes of talking to them, we could convince them to support a one-state solution. So it's not that impossible to change hearts and minds. They're being pressured with fear. Iran is trying to bomb you with nuclear weapons. Gaza is shooting missiles at you. They're scaring these people into voting for them to maintain whatever power it is, and they're not fixing all sorts of issues for Israel. It's a very messed up system because of the conflict. So you need to teach people that this conflict is ruining our lives in deep ways, not just occasionally you get missiles on you, but your country's not functioning. You have tons of people in poverty. You have huge economic disparities. We have one of the most highest GDPs per capita in the world, and you have an enormous number of poor people, like impoverished people in Israel. It's a very sad situation that because of this obsession over the conflict, and it's easy to get people on fear, but when you can reach out to them and you can find a way to connect, so I think it is possible to start a movement that can reach Israelis towards moving towards some kind of solution. Either it was done with the Geneva Initiative, they were able to get people to move towards a two-state solution, and with the public push towards something that's well promoted, I think it's possible. I'm not so hopeless on the Israeli side. Obviously, as a Palestinian, you can't change the Israeli side. I can't change the Palestinian side, so I talk from my perspective. My way to affect, I can convince other Israelis to do it. I can't even necessarily walk into a coffee shop in Ramallah and I'm not even allowed to be there. I need a permit to go there. I'm not necessarily, it's not necessarily okay to talk to me, if I go there, according to certain people, because of normalization and various things. So I can affect my side, and I think there's potential on my side to make effect. I think people can be reasoned with. So my next question is, do you find yourself, or you want to answer back to that, or do you want to move on to the next question?
Very quickly.
Next question. So do you find yourself unintentionally leaning towards two-state solution rhetoric in the case, in order to keep the peace? Do you find yourself, I'm going to talk in terms of two states? That's Israel, that's Palestine.
Yes, I'm just saying very quickly to come back to what you said. I'm saying I agree with you. However, this cognitive approach of convincing is not pragmatic. Also, I do wish, Rafi, that I would see you one day, the president and the prime minister together in one, that you would release. I'm not joking. I know it's, of course, in this setting, it would be funny, but in the way I'm saying it. But I would love those minds to be in the, and there I'm just declaring. I hope more than 2% would stand with you. But in any case, convincing to arrive there even would be very hard with this beautiful analogy. But convincing is not how leadership works. Also, intellectual and cognitive convincing. It's a long-term process to convince, and people are looking for leaders who inspire and also already deal with what they're born with, what the beliefs, the values that they're raised with. And at the end of the day, if you convince somebody after 15 minutes and they're open to you they're like, yes, sure, why not? In one moment of somebody coming and calling back Israeli Zionist nationalism, it will trigger emotional a sense of them, of their belonging, and suddenly everything falls off. And I'm not saying this will have to happen every time. Just bear with me. I'm not being pessimistic. By the way, I'm the least pessimistic person you could ever meet. I speak with tears out of hope, not out of depression, because I believe tears have the power of joy, have the power of actual dreams and visions. But it's tears over how much we abuse each other. But I'm just saying, like in that regard, Rafi, it's not a pragmatic approach to come and say, oh, well, I'm convinced. But you're a beautiful heart. You're speaking with such a beautiful heart, and I commend you for that. That's amazing. But yeah, I just don't see it pragmatic. If you want to come back to this, you can answer also, and then we go to the question, or I can comment on the question.
No, let's move on to the next question because we cover some of these issues.
Because our time is, yeah.
Okay, so do you find yourself leaning? Do you find yourself leaning towards two-state rhetoric? Do you look towards you talking in terms of two states for the sake of peace, even if you don't believe it? But maybe it's not such an appropriate question because you believe in two states.
I think I already answered this.
Yeah.
I'll just very shortly, in a nutshell, put it. My priority is human life. Whatever cuts off the emergent abuse and oppression, especially killing and death, because that's the end of any human's life, as opposed to all forms of oppression. All of them I wanted to end, but I'm saying especially the most emergent, urgent is killing, murder,
right.
Innocent lives. The whatever project that we can bring, the word whatever may sound shallow here, but the project that can bring a stop to this, at least for a few decades faster than this long term that's still where people are being killed, which many people actually believe in. Oh, let's die for this. Let's be martyrs for the sake. And I'm like, but your life is more valuable. Could you just like take a breath? And the children's life. So whatever brings a relief, and then a phase of a healthy space for rethinking without conflict for a while. You know, when I don't have a conflict with my neighbor, I really think about him in a better manner. Really, like in my physical neighbor, I'm speaking now. Like if I have conflict with him, I will not think right. You know, I just want to, but I like a relief. So yeah, two-state solution, if Israel wants, can be very feasible. Israel have been continuously creating an unfeasible type of reality surrounding that solution, so they don't implement it. And unfortunately, with all due respect to yourself, but other people, maybe I don't know about you, use this as an excuse to keep talking about peace, especially Jewish voices. Mind me from saying this out loud, like different names. I don't want to mention names. They keep talking about peace so passionately, yet like very minimally speaking about the oppression of Palestinians. Like, yeah, one state, but they're still Jewish center. They still want it because it's better for Jews. It's better for them. And that's very selfish, especially if you represent the oppressor. If you represent the victims, it's more understandable because you're trying to save the ones who are really suffering. But if you represent, you're a protector, then you're a defender. But if you're representing the oppressor, the stronger, the more powerful, the main abuser, the one who has the control to end or continue the conflict, mainly, not only, but mainly, then there is a very big ethical issue with this peaceful approach. It's like hypocrisy of, I want to talk about, so one state solution. No, but we can make the two-state solution feasible if the Palestinian human life for you as a Jew is more important than whatever the land at the end of the day would look like, or whatever, as you mentioned, whatever Jewish connection you have towards Judea and Samaria or West Bank. Doesn't matter what connection you have or I have. What matters is connection we have first to our human and fellow human family. Then, along those lists, comes our connection maybe to even my car, to my, like my phone. People have connection to their dogs, to their animals, to their houses, to their homes. So many things. They're all beautiful and meaningful. But what is first? You know, that's why I would oppose people who are even animal rights activists say animals and humans are equal. Okay. Well, like, okay, animals and humans are equal. If that's what you're saying, then it's in another reality. So then my relationship to my animal is equally exactly like my relationship to my wife. And like, who do I prioritize? No, they're both equal priority. There's a big issue with that for me, ethically and humanly, and it goes against human nature. Anyway, it's a big discussion. I know animal activists may hate me for this, so I don't want to create another type of discussion, but I'm just saying, this is for me, and I know I took long on this because it's a valid question, but this is for me the priority? No, talking about two-state solution is not because like peace, like in no, I want a real relief of murder and bloodshed and real peace. That's a long-term vision always. Because peace is inward and peace is relational and then peace is outward and then it's no wars, but it's also a state of deep comfort and happiness. That's always a long-term development and evolvement of the whole human race. But we want a relief of the very immediate and dangerous abuse. That's what we need. If it's like simple abuse that we can bear, okay, let's think, okay, you know what, it's okay. Some Israelis sometimes spit, like some, with all due respect to some religious Jews, they spit at our cross, at our churches, Palestinian Christians, they spit, it's okay. That's dealable, kind of. And so we can postpone that if we're gonna speak about two-state versus one. But if everybody, every day, you're abusing the freedom of movement, marriage, abusing who you get married to, who you fall in love with, how you travel, how you move, hospitals, dying at the cross checkpoints in Gaza, and every checkpoint, pregnant women dying, cancer, women with cancer dying, children being bombed, women and children being killed, shot, etc., etc. And this, it's just the list that doesn't stop. This is severe abuse that needs immediate. That's why I mentioned I'm quoting Norman Finkelstein. He's like about international. Now, do it now. If we apply international,
you should see new stuff from Norman Finkelstein. I'll send you. You know, the situation has changed sort of internationally in terms of calling Human Rights Watch calls Israel an apartheid state, and B'Tselem, and I said there's a movement calling for, it's not clear for one state, but calling it an apartheid regime. So he's sort of rethinking how he's.
But what do you mean? Wait, when I mentioned Norman Finkelstein, you're commenting because of.
I've made several recent videos he's come out with, because that's the sort of the zeitgeist, you could say, of 2021, that Israel, you know, calling Israel an apartheid state amongst the sort of activists that are promoting peace, saying that moving in the direction of one state. So that's a development that's, you know, I think is happening. Because I don't think you can have it, like I said, separating into two states. You have 800,000 people, Israelis, living on the other side. What does that mean to just separate into two states? It's easy to say, but it's not so practical to do.
What about separating all the 5 million versus 2 million or a bit less Palestinians from each other? We have 5 million, around 5 million West Bank and Gaza, and 2 million in Israel today, for what we call Israel today. So it's way bigger than 800,000. So still the approach is Jewish-centered. Where's the priority to stop the abuse, Rafi, of those who are being killed, massacred? This is more important than Jewish settlers living. They can leave if they want without being abused, without being forced, if they want, and be offered something else in Israel. But the Judaization of the land, the agenda of removing the other, which is us, is the very root issue. And that's what I hope you as a Jew would focus on removing and rooting out, rather than focusing on just kind of almost romantic idea of bringing all together, because it's more realistic. But I think
it's unrealistic to remove people. Like, it's in a practical sense.
Should be more important to you as an ethical man. We are being killed. This should be more of your cry, not the removing of people. At the end of the day,
I think removing of people is also unethical. I think saying that we're going to remove 800,000 people is and it's not going to happen. So it's not practical. So also saying that that's the solution is somewhat, I wouldn't say unethical, but it's not getting you the results you'd want. It's not the.
No, but I'm not saying remove them. I'm saying that you're removing them equally to people being killed. That's very not true. You can't put somebody.
It depends where people are being killed. In Gaza, they're shooting missiles at Israel because Israel was. It started with riots over Sheikh Jarrah and removing it. It started over houses. There was 28 families they wanted to remove from houses where the land was owned by Jews prior to 1948.
Okay.
Then and there was a court case over it, and there was protest. This protest led to riots on Al-Aqsa Mosque. in the area of Al-Aqsa Mosque. They set a tree on fire. It was very dramatic, and they sent soldiers into Al-Aqsa Mosque. And Gaza said, I don't like what's going on. Hamas, it doesn't look good. It doesn't film well. I want to shoot missiles at Jerusalem. And they shot missiles at Jerusalem 2 weeks ago while I was in the place. And then both sides were shooting at each other. This wasn't necessarily going to be resolved over removing Jews from Judea and Samaria. This is a separate issue. This is feelings about East Jerusalem. I suppose if you could evicted every Jew over the Green Line into Israel, you could maybe make peace. I don't know. But I don't think they're willing to do that. I don't think it's moral to evict. You're talking about an eviction on the scale of the Nakba. You're talking about evicting 800,000 people from their houses. What is the Nakba if not that?
No, but I'm asking you, why are you focusing on this eviction? Who is asking for eviction?
Yeah, by saying I want 2 states now. Just implement the law. What law? What would you do in practice?
Brother,
how would you implement a 2-state solution without a whole lot of cooperation when you have so many Israelis behind that are going to be on the Palestinian side?
2-state doesn't mean 2 separate enemies. It means peaceful states next to each other.
It's all these connections.
1 second, but separate autonomy, self-determination for both. That's a right. Whoever chooses to stay in Palestine should be treated with equality and dignity. And this is what the Palestinians even agreed upon, to keep all the settlements. We gave up on so many of historic.
I didn't see an issue of Palestinians agreeing to keep all the settlements. They mentioned it, but I didn't. I met Sai Barakat, and I talked to him, and he said, I asked, can Jews live in Palestine? He said, sure, Jews can live in Palestine. Of course, I'm not racist. I told him I supported 1 state. He said, great, I'd be happy to do 1 state. You know, I could call him Mar Erekat. You could call it Yericho. What do I care? I asked him if we made 2 states, could settlers stay? He said, no, they came here illegally. They'd all have to go. On whatever boundaries they agreed to, you first have to remove all the settlers from their houses. And then if they ask nicely, maybe we'll let them back. We'll think about it. Like, come on, is that practical? You know, I'm being here.
Rafi, don't project Saeb Zarakat's opinion over the Palestinians. He passed away already.
I thought he was the most liberal. He was the most liberal of the Palestinian Authority. He was the most reasonable.
The PA, although I despise it, the PA or the PLO in history until today, even with the Taba Accords and Camp David, they accepted the presence of Jewish settlers to stay peacefully. They didn't say they cannot. And whatever Sai Barakat told you on the personal level doesn't change any situation that the Palestinian Authority, if I want to say Palestinian Authority, gave in the different table of negotiations. On the other hand, it is Israel who kept refusing to stop building and stealing Palestinian land and stop building and bringing more of those settlers because they want to make it like an issue like you're arguing now. So you're using theft of land as an excuse to not have a 2-state solution. No, I'm not for evicting of any human, brother. I am for bringing an end to the suffering of the victim first. Then we bring whatever the oppressor needs also to live as a human being. If he needs to live as a human being in Palestine, he has to accept the status quo that this is now under the autonomy of Palestine. You want to stay peacefully. If you don't want to stay, then you can leave also peacefully. Nobody should evict. Of course not. If somebody is claiming this, I disagree with them. That's up to them. But I'm just saying, so some Palestinians or many Palestinians still believe that we need to restore all of Palestine and kick out most of Israelis, not as people, but the whole system out. I don't believe this is at least practical. For liberation is liberating people from abusive systems, not liberating us from the actual physical presence of those people. But that's how you feel as a victim when somebody is daily slapping you, kicking you in the butt, shooting you, spitting at you. What would you feel? You want to get rid of them physically, emotionally, forever. That's a natural human response to any abuse. Yet on the practical, when we bring into agreements, that's a whole different story. It saddens me that you're focusing on this eviction and you're kind of undermining the 2-state solution based on eviction, and as if now the Jews are the victims. And that's for me twisted. It's not, those settlers are the victims.
That's within the proposals. I mean, the idea that what would be left under Palestinian Authority, they would remove the settlers. But so I I would love to see the Palestinian Authority say that this is the formal position that they would let, but they're not going to, because otherwise, then Israelis will say it's fine, we can keep building. They said they could stay, So they want to put they don't want to say that as their official. Maybe in secret negotiations they would agree, but
they agreed to stop building settlements and keep the rest. What are you saying? Of course they agreed. We even agreed not to bring our refugees into historic Palestine, but rather to bring it on the West Bank. All of this is agreed upon.
I'd like to see, show me all these agreements. So I've never seen some document, official position. We've given up on the right of return for Palestinians. I don't think most Palestinians
I'm telling you, accepted that we don't have to bring refugees to historic Palestine, to the new state of Palestine. Yes.
I don't think so.
Okay, sure. If you
can show me that this was their position. I'm sure
sharing with you facts. If you don't believe me, I agree, but just bear with me. I'm sharing with you facts. What happened? Maybe I'm mistaken, but if you don't, assuming they're facts, it doesn't matter if you agree or not. If they're facts.
I don't agree that this is the position of the Palestinian Authority. Maybe in secret they would accept.
Maybe about the rhetoric of Hamas until today, even though Hamas itself in 2012, Ismail Haniyeh even accepted that Israel exists, although rejecting its legality, himself calling Hamas a terroristic extremist party, he himself accepted, and he said, I'm accepting a two-state solution on 1967 board. And he didn't say, although all the time the rhetoric of Hamas, we want to return every 1 centimeter of historic Palestine fully back. So
I've never seen a position paper where they renounce the right of return. I don't think that such exists.
I didn't say
I support their right to return. I'm not going to argue that
you're using my words. I didn't say we renounce the right of return. No Palestinian should do that. I'm saying that I accepted that the return of Palestinians do not have necessarily to be back in Haifa and Akko and Jaffa. It can be back in the new state of Palestine, which will be formed over the borders of 1967. This was said over and over in negotiations. If you're feeling this is new, like many Jewish people I speak to, I tell them even we are the ones who proposed the two-state solution. They're like, huh? And you are the ones who rejected, and the U.S. vetoed you. They're like, huh? So with all due respect, like many
I would love you to show me some facts on that, because that's not my understanding. That the renouncing right of return to Israel, maybe in secret negotiations, but that's never been a formal publication by the Palestinians. I've never seen a document saying we don't believe that we have the right of return to Israel. But now, I as a person, as an Israeli, as a person, I don't care if they want. I support their right to return, but I know most Israelis are not happy about that. So, anyways, let's say if you are
last but not least about this, please, you cannot compare anything like settlers with a Nakba. Nakba, or catastrophe for us, is aboriginals living peacefully in their own homeland. People coming from outside, regardless if they have roots or not, doesn't matter. Coming and claiming that, kicking them out by force. Even if we want to say, although I am all against it, that...
Okay, I want to turn after this because I don't necessarily agree.
Settlers, 1 second, just comparatively, it's unfair and it's twisted. Even if you say, oh, evicting now 800,000 settler thieves of Palestinian land who just moved in the last 30, 40, 50 years, and some of them just now, like literally now, and every second they move in and all over Hebron Hills and Ramallah, all the way of the north and the very south of Araqib, just to name a few. If you're saying this is equal, that's a very big issue, brother, with ethics. It's like saying, oh, I stole your house, and now you're going to get it back by force. You're exactly equally to me a thief. No. It doesn't work like that.
I would say...
I'm not saying... Please bear with me.
Okay, but give me a turn here. I want to counter-argue.
I'm saying... Yes, Rafi, I know. I'm just saying, because this is a crucial issue. I'm saying you can't do this to people in the same way. Anyone who's bringing back his stolen car, everybody would congratulate him. They will not call him a thief back, because he didn't steal what's not his. Now, I'm not saying let's do it because it's anyway multi-dimensional. There's people born into the system, there's children, etc., etc. So I'm just continuing my point because it's sensitive. So allow me. So I am not for evicting, but using this as if compared with the Nakba, and then also using it as if this is against the two-state solution, and as if the two-state solution is mainly formed and based upon evicting the victim Jews. Oh, now they're gonna suffer. That's just victim mentality, twisted, and it's the same Jewish-centeredness that I keep finding, not in you personally, but in this narrative, rhetoric that many Jewish even activists keep bringing, and as if they're equally in the same platform being victims. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me go ahead. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I'm talking as humanists, not as God gave us the whole West Bank, none of that. I'm telling you about people living there right now. In Israel proper, more Palestinians lost their property than in the West Bank. Most of the places where Jews are living in the West Bank are not necessarily private land of Palestinians. They didn't evict them from their houses. More likely, if you're living in Israel proper, you're living on a private person's house, than if you're living in the West Bank. It's just from a perspective that I cut the line at 67, and this is stolen, and that's legal. That's legal theft. This is how we got the Sheikh Jarrah, right? Sheikh Jarrah was property of Jews pre-1948. Malha was property of Palestinians pre-1948. Jews were in Baka. The Palestinians were evicted from Baka and Malha and Ein Kerem, and they moved to Sheikh Jarrah. Jews moved from Sheikh Jarrah and moved to Malka and Ein Kerem. They switched. And now we're saying that this after 67 we got it back, so Jews can claim it and Arabs can't claim it. So now you're making a cutoff at a certain date where something from pre-48 counts or it doesn't count. So Palestinians don't need to get back to Malka, they don't need to get back to Baka or to Ein Kerem, but on a hill in Beit El, there was no town. The Jews who moved there, they didn't evict Palestinians. It was a town next to Ramallah, an empty hill, and they moved there. You're saying this is stolen, not sure stolen from who, but Ein Kerem, literally living in houses that belong to Arabs, they have the keys to, that's not stolen. I'm accepting that. So I just feel like it's cognitive dissonance. And then to say that these Jews who moved to their houses, whether or not it was legal under international law, they bought houses with their savings, whatever they did, they worked, their actual life. They moved there. Now there's children who've grown up in these houses, and this is their world. This is the only thing they know. This is where they rode their first bicycle. This is the park they rode on their first swing. This is their memories. This is their actual life, the town they grew up in, and this is their house. And you're going to tell this kid, you have to leave this house because it was illegal for you to live in this house, even if it was empty. But because of politics of 1967, we're going to say it's practical to kick you out of your house because you're Jewish and you're in the wrong spot. Whereas in pre-1948 in Israel, it's not practical. There, I'm not giving the Palestinian back his house because even though it's moral, it's impractical. But here expulsion. And if you were to evict everyone over the 60s, all the Jews over the 67 borders, it's 800,000 people. That's the number of people who were evicted in the Nakba. People, I don't care how many generations their grandparents own the house, they have stories, olive trees. They're people now. They're human beings alive today that live in these houses. They grew up there, their mother lives here, this is their memories, this is their existence. And you're going to say, we're going to have to move everything and uproot you because of practical politics, because I feel like these people have been robbed. Most of them have been robbed in Israel. They didn't even live in the West. They're, half the population of the West Bank used to live in Israel. More than half the population of Gaza lived in Israel. Why set the clock at morality? Why not say it's wrong to keep people out of their houses? In 48, it's wrong to keep people out of their houses now. We respect human beings. If Palestinians want to move back somewhere so it makes them feel better, let's talk about that. But we don't need to. I'm going to say no to you and no to you. You keep your attachment to Jaffa or Haifa. This is wrong. Feel bad about how you feel your connections. And Jews it's not okay for you to feel connected to the house you grew up in, the neighborhood you were raised in, the place you rode your bicycle and you played in the park with your friends. That's wrong because it's not practical attachment. I say be honest with ourselves about where we're attached to. And be okay and find a solution that resonates. And if that's two states, so it's two states where there's Jews living in the West Bank and Palestinians living in Israel, and two states with open borders, and let people pick the state they want to live in. And if you say, if we're already doing that, why don't we have one state? So fine, then but that should be the frame of reference. It's not like you're evil for wanting to live in your house, and you're evil for wanting to go back to your house. That's moral. That's justifiable, having attachment to a place. But saying I need to be segregated because I can be, because I need to be separated, I can't live with other people. I feel like that's what needs to be healed. That's what's wrong, on both sides.
Rafi, I hear you, but a few things that you're saying, I feel you're putting it into my mouth. Did I say that it's okay to evict people?
No, but that's sort of the framework of. You said it's not equivalent. You said it's not equivalent. The Jews living in Beit El now, because it's stolen, but the Jews living in Ein Kerem in a Palestinian's house, that's not stolen. What's the difference?
I said it's not equivalent. Did I say it means that it's good?
I don't know. You tell me.
I'll ask you a question. Is it equivalent if I steal now 1 shekel from your money versus if I steal 1 million shekel from your money? Is it equivalent?
It's not equivalent, but both are wrong. You can't steal.
That's it. So to compare both and make them equally wrong? No. Wrongdoing is a spectrum. Like we say, evil is a spectrum. Immorality is a spectrum.
I would say it's more evil to live in a Palestinian's house in Israel than it is to live in the West Bank on a hill where nobody was living. From just the perspective of human beings who live in the land.
Now we're discussing the intricate details, or maybe this is even worse, rather than Israel is worse rather than. I'm not saying it's worse or if it's better, but bear with me. I didn't even say taking in Karim's Nakbe. I didn't say anything about the Nakbe. You're putting things into my mouth, which I don't appreciate, Rafi.
Right.
So we're speaking respectfully with each other. I didn't assume things the same. I even said, when I spoke about Jews, I said, maybe not you.
Right, I'm not saying you, but the framework of the two-state solution where Palestinian right of return to Israel is bad or denied, or is we'll accept that we're not going to do that, but Jews living in the West Bank is also denied, or this is wrong. So it's two things where I feel that's in the framework of the classic two-state solution. I don't know if maybe you support a modified version, an opener version of a two-state, but that's sort of the classic framework of two states.
But it doesn't matter what's the classic. We are discussing me and you, Rafi and Malkon. Okay, right? I respectfully.
Would you be willing to give up the right of return to Palestinians to Israel? As Malkon? Yeah, even on behalf of other Palestinians, even though you're.
Brother, my family was kicked out of Jaffa and West Jerusalem. Do I have the right to give up on my family? If they accept after their permission, I might, only for my family. But do I have the right to give up on my people? It's very abusive of my people. Of course not. I have to ask them if they want to give up on it for the sake of living. Now, those are two separate. It's not about giving up. By the way, I didn't even use the word giving up. Again, you're putting things into my mouth, which I don't appreciate.
Okay.
It's misleading, Rafi, please. We need to, if we want to continue, we need to respect each other's here. I'm respecting your opinions. I'm not twisting them, so don't twist mine, please.
Okay.
So I'm saying, simply, I didn't address the Nakba yet, except in the comparative equality thing. I didn't address the kicking out of Palestinians back then, blah, 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 blah. And I never used the word renounce the right of return. I said Palestinian Authority, I'm telling you, even Hamas in 2012 accepted Israel to exist. And Israel never accepted Palestine to exist. The terroristic one who's called terroristic is accepting even Israel, and Israel never even, the democracy they call themselves, accepted us to even exist. So that's just the dilemma, and for me, the falsification of the narrative of Zionist right wing, not you, narrative that brings this propaganda that the oppressed who is resisting in every way, or the raped woman who's telling her rapist to completely disappear or die. I wish I would never see that. She is the vulgar terrorist rather than the rapist who has the power to rape her. So that's the problem for me of equality again. bringing the Nakba and comparing it with 800,000 people who I'm completely against evicting, and I never used, let's say, evicting, and you're putting into my mouth under the umbrella of classic. I mean, your words are not.
I'm just saying, so you would you agree that the evicting them, in theory, would be equivalent to evicting?
Your words, Rafi, are not at all classic, and I didn't assume you're putting classic. You have a unique way of putting it. The classic right wing, and this is our land. God, some don't use God, but this is ours. By the land, 3,000 years ago, we had a kingdom. We have all the right to be here. Bam, bam, boo. You are the terroristic. We are trying to live in peace. And they create all kind of. I mean, this is the agenda. But you're not like classic, and I'm not classic either. We have to understand Palestinians have a spectrum also. We're also humans with different opinions, so we disagree. Yes, we're not less human, and I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm just saying, like, for people to say, how can Palestinians have two factions in war? Well, we're just unfortunate. We don't have the fortune to be in division or to be different. But every healthy family has people opposing each other. That's just healthy freedom, intellectual freedom. That shouldn't be like, oh, look at the Palestinians, Fatah and Hamas. Like, again. So what I'm trying to say, Rafi, we made a lot of concessions. The main condition that kept happening in the negotiation is Israel to stop building settlements. Sharon and others and everybody came after Olmert. No, we don't stop building settlements. Very nice. We were still stealing your land, but please have peace with us. This has been the Israeli, that's why we call the US funny peace process, we call it the blockade of peace. The same with the Oslo Accords. It made what Israel wanted. They put Palestinians all under its control, and the sovereignty of Israel stayed, and there is no sovereignty for the oppressed, weak group. And that's what Israel has achieved. Israel has been achieving everything in negotiation because it's achieving its own continuous sovereignty, supremacy over the Palestinian weak ones, and continuing with the occupational system, which is very similar in the beginning to the colonization system of 1948, where they put people in martial law. They couldn't work, they couldn't move freely, they couldn't, a lot of things that Palestine, they didn't have nationality, they didn't have citizenship. Many similar stuff like to us today, like East Jerusalem and also the West Bank and Gaza. The difference, maybe they didn't do a blockade like Gaza, which is the biggest prison. So please, just mind how you don't put things into my words, because it's very disrespectful, and it becomes like I have to defend something that I didn't say. Well, why? Right? I didn't say, I didn't use the word renounce. I didn't promote any eviction of any Jew, even though by human logic, not by moral logic, by human logic, if somebody is oppressing me, they naturally, emotionally, natural emotion, they deserve to be definitely kicked out or removed or punished. And that's why we have prison system. It's a revenge system, which I don't believe in. All the systems of imprisonment and government, it's a revenge system that's not really bringing humanity into morality. It's rather taking revenge of the oppressor, and I wish the oppressor, sometimes they're taking revenge of the more innocent people, and they're not bringing humans into any emotional maturity or psychological character whatsoever. That actually abuse. That's why prisoners leave more abusive than they were when they got into prison at many times, not always. But so we are, I don't believe in the system, I believe in mercy. So I love your enemies, but I believe the system of Jesus, this philosopher, as a philosophy, it's practical, it's doable. If I love my enemy, I'll bring back his conscience. At least there's way more opportunity to bring back his conscience and actually fight together against injustice. And that's my dream, and I see it coming true. This is one small example of us fighting together against injustice. I mean, we have some small, I think it's a misunderstanding rather over semantics, but we agree for the most part, I think, in a lot of ways about general concepts.
Okay, so let's try to get move on with questions. If you were able to put yourself in the Palestinian shoes, or would you have accepted? I guess the Israelis. Would you have accepted the offers, the deals that were offered, if you were Israeli?
Again, excuse me. If I were to,
would you have if you were Israeli? Would you have accepted? If you were putting yourself in the shoes of the other, I guess that's what's meant by the question here. So would you have accepted the offer at Camp David, or would you have accepted these offers that were like the proposal by the Palestinian Authority? Would you have accepted this?
If I were an Israeli with the way Israelis are, with no ethics, lack of conscience, sorry to say, like in the same way that Zionists have, like not all Israelis, I'm saying, unfortunately, the majority of the political mindset, you mean? Of course I would reject. But if I were an Israeli human, like with a humanist, like you say yourself, approach, I wouldn't only accept, I would first apologize to the Palestinians for all of the miseries, crimes I brought against them. I would ask them what they want me to do. Second, if I'm a real human, after justice, not after revenge, after justice, human rights and equality, I would ask them, what would you like me, how would you like me to compensate you? And even if they tell me leave the country, yes, I may fight to stay peacefully, but I would honor the request. And this is how a rapist would apologize to his rape. Maybe he can't do the rape. He can't undo, the rape. But he can ask her, what would you like me to do? If she asks him even to go to prison for a while, this is a true repentant, a true person who was trying to reconcile. This is the way. Like Germany, Nazi Germany, apologized, compensated the Jews, although today they support them killing Palestinians by giving them weapons. But they apologized, admitted, and asked them, how would you like us to do? And today, Jews in Germany are allowed, they're not allowed to live or be, although some may argue there's still a bit of anti-Semitism here and there socially. That's another topic, but we're speaking about severe, there's nobody kicking out Jews out of Germany today. For example, although the word Germany is a limitation of the Nazi system, but I'm just saying, for the sake now of the argument. So yes, if I were an Israeli with a conscience really awakened, I might even leave the country if that helps promote peace. Or I may still be here and be a real activist towards peace like yourself, if I want to assume with good faith that you are. I don't know you enough. I'm honored that I know you now shortly. Don't get me wrong. I'm not assuming you're not. But I don't know your lifestyle. I don't know what activism you're. I know you're engaging with me in a very healthy conversation. That's not necessarily activism alone. That's a certain layer of healthy, of course, promotion of human rights. Again, no implied accusation. You don't know me either. Maybe I suck. Maybe I'm just pretending to be caring about it. No, truly. And maybe I'm just racist out there against Jewish people when I deal with them daily. Do I know how to love, accept my enemy on a daily basis? That's a question of also what I'm claiming my values to be, rather than hypocritical stuff. So yes, if I'm just to summarize, I would first ask the victim, how do they want me to compensate them? Sorry, first would admit my wrongdoing, then how do they want me to compensate? And then whatever they choose, I would respect and submit, unless they're asking of my, they're gonna abuse me back, or let's take revenge. Can you stay there and we allow us to hit you and shoot you in the leg? That would not be healthy boundaries for me to say, oh please, yes, can you crucify me now because I crucified? Because it will not help the conflict. It's just fulfilling the revengeful feelings and emotional kind of like almost ecstasy. No, it doesn't work like this. But what works is to ask the victim. That would honor the victim. I hope this would happen one day as a revolution that never happened in the world, I think. Never ever the oppressors came to their victims, oh, how would you like us to? Nazi Germany, I mentioned, but it was not like, out of free will, oh, please, we want to apologize. It's pressure of Britain and US and Russia at the time. And so it's not like, oh, please. So this is how the oppressors work. This is the psychology of an oppressor. He's a denier. He's an identity crisis. He lives in another fantasy world. He's disconnected from his fellow humans. He thinks he's the center of the universe, self-centered. He's arrogant. He's rude. And he is just the simplification of the argument. It's not everybody. And again, it's just to explain the psychology. It's an it more. That's the psychology of it.
Okay, so you want to ask me again, or I'll just answer it? Yes. If I was a Palestinian, yeah, I don't think so. Maybe the Omer plan, but yeah, I don't think there was the right of return was enough. I don't think the borders were reasonable enough. The borders had sort of a wall, and then had East Jerusalem had sort of the international boundary with the barrier, and then East Jerusalem was controlled by Palestine, sort of, but not in practice, because it would be under the Israeli Jerusalem municipality. It didn't. I don't know. I would be skeptical of the proposals that were offered, and certainly everything since Omer I would not accept. I don't know if I would accept the partition of the land at all if I was Palestinian. I think that may be very difficult. I don't know how to imagine if I was Palestinian, but I imagine the majority of them came from what's now Israel. I think it would be difficult for me to accept that I'm going to have not be able to go back to the places that we're from. So I don't know. I don't know if I'd be the most reasonable Palestinian. And I would I think I would move in the direction of wanting one state, or I don't know. I'd be very disappointed with the reality if I was Palestinian. It'd be very challenging for me. The next question is, how do you feel about BDS? Boycott, divestments, and sanction. And maybe anti-normalization as well, as long as we're talking on this topic.
It's a very, very, very tough topic, because it's very multi-layered. I think BDS has a legit way, partially, of finding a form of resistance that's peaceful, that's effective, hopefully. However, the problem comes down at when it's under the umbrella of relationships and human connections. And that's where normalization, anti-normalization gets really tricky here. Like me talking to you. That can be considered normalization for some. Well, for me, if that's considered normalization for some, if I can speak to a respectable human, regardless of their Zionist background or Jewish background, about how even they're oppressing me, that's just a very, very, very blind notion of finding any solution, because that goes against the very essence of confronting your fellow human, even if that fellow human, as Jesus says, is not open. You continue to confront. If they're not open at all, that's when you cut off, and that's what's BDS. It's cutting off. But on the Palestinian-Israeli level, we have so many people are open to hear. And yes, if somebody is not open to hear, I don't want to connect necessarily about this. So my problem with BDS is big about stereotyping any connection, any form of, although not all of them do that, but if you read the website, it has, like, for example, they say competence for peace is normalization. Well, I see Israelis and Palestinians co-resisting together the occupation, calling it by name. And you're telling me that's normalization? Uh-oh. So then what? So, like, what is not normalization? Like this?
Yeah, there's not much left.
Yeah, it creates this, okay, we're completely enemies, we should not even say hi. And then the PLO was the first to even negotiate on the tables and say hi. And the PLO was supposedly our liberation organization. And so, and they said, you're dealing with another human. You're not dealing with another species, dude. This is not a dinosaur. And you're trying to, like, eliminate the dinosaur so he doesn't, like, well, because if you eliminate the dinosaur, he would not see you behind the tree, and then you have your freedom to jump off the tree. Like this, like we're same family. So that's my problem with BDS, but I think they can be very effective. It can be a dream movement if it's an economic centered, even within Palestine and Israel today, of boycotting, especially settlements, but not only, and sending a very loud voice of imminent, urgent need to stop the abuse, the occupation now. I think it can be a very type of pressurizing or have a pressure strategy that can be very effective. I imagine it at the personal level. If a few friends suddenly cut me off, they don't want to talk to me, I would suddenly start trying to connect and ask what's wrong with me. I might be able, like, lenient to change something. Of course, if I become enemies with them even further, it can take me a while of my arrogance until I come. But they're my friends. Like, I need them if there is a need. So that's the economic part, because Israel would need economy. So we need to tackle. I like the tackling of needs, of BDS strategic, but sometimes it's cultish in its approach. It also like approaches even things like romantic love and connections, where people falling in love as even normalization. Like, it gets so inhumane in a robotic manner, as if we are made of this not animalistic even, like just like materialistic kind of components, you know, like as if what's dude, like, and at the end of, as if they're promoting human rights, which is true. But what is a human right? Isn't a human right is to love, be loved, accept and be accepted, connect and be connected, socialize and be socialized with? Isn't that part of our Palestinian freedom? It's not only the physical movement of Ramallah and Jerusalem. That's stupid then. We walk between Ramallah and Jerusalem to meet somebody else, not for the sake of freedom. Some people are very comfortable to stay at home all day long. It doesn't matter that you block certain cities to them. But what matters to me, for example, is to travel around to be able to meet humans. If I'm blocked from that, then that's also another problem. So, no, like, stay in your place. Also, sometimes it lacks this pragmatic, when is it gonna achieve something? Like forever, keep boycotting forever. So we need a movement. We need something. Yes, it's a movement, but if it's not gathering people, then it's very unfair towards certain individuals also. And some may say, but this is why people are giving up on it. We need to bring those people who don't have enough ethics to make it. Yeah, but without unity, then some movements don't necessarily work. We need to work on the unity without forcing, stereotyping each other. You're normalizer. Like, I was called a normalizer.
Sure.
You're normal. Dude, like, people would call Jesus a normalizer. For me, Jesus, like, brought such the whole message.
Love your enemy. That's normalization, man.
Yeah, like, so Jesus is a normalizer. He lacks ethics. He's an unethical dude. He doesn't care about justice, and he died for justice, for peace. So, you know, he still rebuked the wrongdoing of the authorities, and that's why they crucified him. At the time, we were speaking about religious authority in this particular context, not the Roman authority only. And he directed the religion because it was the essence of ethics towards the Jewish people that he was part of. And he didn't give up on rebuking them, although he faced the risk of being killed. So he didn't compromise on it. But he still communed and connected and communicated with those abusive religious leaders. Abusive, sorry, to us. I'm not saying the Jews were abusive. But in our eyes, some religious leaders at the time, Sanhedrin, were abusive towards him. Not maybe in Jewish perspective. I'm speaking now in Christian perspective. So, So like, it's making this for me, it's this ultimate character of ethics and like deep wisdom into this normalized, like if Jesus was alive today, he would go everywhere, speak with everybody, and he would speak to the government of Israel that you're doing wrong, but he would still connect with Israelis, that he would heal the sick, the Israeli sick, he would raise the Israeli dead, he would, all those miracles that we speak about. He would not only do it to the Palestinians, and he would stand at the checkpoint and say you're doing wrong, and he would try to get permit to pass, and and he would defend the poor, the oppressed, the widows, and all the children who are being killed. But he wouldn't go and explode himself with a bomb, because it would not help much. So yeah.
Sounds good.
No, we've been talking for a long time.
Okay, so I'll tell you quickly where I stand on BDS. I appreciate that those that are trying to boycott me economically and peacefully instead of trying to kill me. It's much better. I'd rather you try to boycott me than try to shoot me. That's I thank you. But in terms of practical, in terms of does it work, I would say I don't see BDS really working. There's no country that's boycotting Israel now that wasn't boycotting Israel before BDS existed. The only countries that boycott Israel are increasingly small number of Muslim countries that were boycotting Israel in the 1950s already. These are the countries that have been, and less, and now we have Qatar and Bahrain and whatnot are starting to open up to Israel. In terms of BDS, mainly exists in Western universities in England and in the United States among liberal Western college students, and they're not getting very much effect. And in the Middle East, in Israel, nobody's boycotting. I do business with Palestinians. I sell stuff to the Palestinian Authority. I work with people in the West Bank. I work with Israeli Arabs. Nobody's boycotting Israel here. You go into a grocery store in the West Bank, you see Israeli products. So there's not really an economic boycott in amongst the Palestinians. There's a cultural boycott. There's anti-normalization, and there's, in Egypt doesn't really have an economic boycott, but they have a cultural boycott against Israel. So there's Palestine is similar to other Middle Eastern countries with the cultural boycott. In terms of BDS as an economic boycott, that hasn't really been successful. They got SodaStream to move out. Maybe they've labeled Israeli wines made in the West Bank as not labeled in Israel. These are small victories. This is not, we're still having good relations with, the most advanced countries in the world, do plenty of business with Europe and America and Japan and Canada and whatnot. It's not, it doesn't seem like it's going to be effective. And the anti-normalization, it's sort of two strategies. One is it's trying to monopolize the ability to negotiate for the Palestinian Authority. They're pushing the idea of anti-normalization because they don't want to be going around. They don't want somebody to negotiate. They're worried about maybe the Mordechai Kadar plan, like we talked the first idea, like that Israel will negotiate divide and conquer. They'll negotiate a deal with Hebron. They'll negotiate a separate deal with Jenin. They're like, we want to talk to them. We want to be but then in practice, it's not really, Israel is not negotiating with the mayor of Jenin for a separate deal. We're talking about peace activists like you and me are talking about what should we do? Should we convince our governments to do 2 states or 1 state? This isn't what, taking real negotiations out of the hands of the PA, because we don't have that power. We're taking the powers we have as civilians, as activists, where, the only people who really care about the anti-normalization are peace activists. Your average Israeli, you'll tell them that Palestinians don't want to interact with you. They're like, I had no idea. I'm not sure. They're not sure if they care, but they, that's interesting to them. They had they're not even aware that, university students in the West Bank don't want to talk to them. They're like, oh, I don't even know. And it's not, you can also on Facebook find people that will talk to you anyways. So it's not very effective. It's used to pressure people, basically peace activists, from meeting with Israelis and putting down what are peace activities. And in some cases, fine, you could argue those peace activities are not really effective. Maybe they're just singing Kumbaya and they're not really co-resisting. So, it's fine to set up guidelines. Listen, you have to at least say it's an occupation, and you have to say that there's something wrong and you want to change it. And then, okay, then we'll talk to you. Set up some reasonable ground rules for this relationship. Okay, if we're going to be, what does it mean to co-resist? I mean, Israelis, it's hard for them, that term. What am I resisting? Myself, But you say, listen, I admit that it's oppression here and that you want to make it better and that there's a system of segregation or inequality or unfairness, and be against that, and let's put our heads together and say, okay, what did we as regular citizens, as human beings, what can we do about it to make it better? So fine. I think that's where they need to go, and not be like, don't talk to anybody, Israelis, don't talk to anybody who calls himself a Zionist or whatever, because that term can mean 1,000 different things to different people. Just, make realistic rules. Do you agree that the system is unjust? Do you think people are suffering? Do you want to change it? And if you say yes, fine, let's figure out how to change it, That should be legitimate to have that conversation. So that's what I think about BDS and anti-normalization.
And I just want to say that a lack of, just to mention my opinion here very quickly, a lack of effectiveness until now doesn't mean necessarily it's not the right methodology. Like to say that for over 400 years in South Africa trying different stuff that didn't work, it means those methods are not effective. It's not complete evidence, because it takes time for the oppressor to eventually come to a place where there's enough pressure on him or them to release. It's not because the methods, like Palestinians tried peaceful methods, they tried now, like Hamas, they believe the main method should be military, etc., in order to bring about a change. All methods together might bring about a certain layer of thing, but it doesn't mean which method is the best is a big question. And sometimes the best is takes the longest time, which I believe, for example. I believe love, not in a cheesy way as people hear me, love that requires justice. For example, the Bible teaches that love is just. I am just to my children. I'm just to my daughter and son, for example, because I love them, not because I like justice. Justice stems from love. I want them to live justly because I love them. I care about them. And this is where I love my people, Palestinians, because that's why I want the justice, because I love them. They're meaningful to me, and I'm meaningful to them. We're family. So I love them. That's where justice is not, oh, revenge. Oh, like some people coming from, the evildoer should be punished. And this very, like, almost sadistic, and as if this will bring like relief to the human race. And I mean, the human race, since the onset, have been killing what so-called they thought is oppressor. The oppression never ended by killing the oppressor. Unfortunately, we need to kill those concepts in a way and create. So yeah, BDS, and I'm not saying mature BDS doesn't say don't connect with Israelis at all. It actually requires a ground. However, I myself challenge that, and I tell them, well, how can I create a ground with somebody who never even heard the Palestinian perspective? Then you have to say an occupation first, and then I have a meeting with you. Wait, but he doesn't know what an occupation even is. He doesn't believe in those. So I need to introduce. So that's part of resistance. That's part of me. I'm being an ambassador to my cause. How are you preventing this? So this is my problem with them. It's limiting, but it's not necessarily the and it's the stereotyping, putting names like combatants for peace, like the families of the bereaved families. Those are all normalization. So this is the problem. Normalization at its root means compromising justice. And I'm such a justice-centered person myself. How can you accuse me of that when I'm speaking directly to any Jewish Israeli and telling them you're not being just, and they don't like me for it? I have people now in the Gaza thing attacking me just for putting Save Sheikh Jarrah on my Facebook. I have right-wing people on my face. They're like attacking me, and I'm like, dude, are you like, what's wrong with you? Like, you wanted to add me on Facebook, and then you don't want me to express saving some. I didn't even say kill the Jews. I'm just saying save Sheikh Jarrah. I didn't say hate the Jews. Like I have Israelis on their Facebook saying Jews terrorists. Arabs are terrorists. They're all terrorists, and they're on my friend list. Believe it or not. Well, I can't force them to change. That takes time. But do I compromise with their principles? I say, sure. Let's all eat together for the killing of for the terroristic Arabs. Like, no, it takes time to bring about a change, and that should be a realization, as well as keeping in mind the emergency that we need to move on. Of course, I know those people like pragmatic is this. It's an emergency, but yeah.
Okay. So what I would say is the next question, because we got running out of time.
Wait,
what can you say about the language?
More question? Wasn't that the last?
More questions.
Oh my God! So we can't continue later, Rafi?
Maybe if you've got to run. We get just only 3 more questions.
It's too long for the listener.
What's that buzzing?
It's too long for the listeners. It's too long for the listeners, and I don't know, like, if we.
Okay, if you want, I could ask you the 3 questions. Maybe we could sort of wrap them into one answer for him. If you have the last 3, do you have a little more time?
Sure. If we don't have to do another meeting, and I'm flexible, but it's like it says 2 hours. I came 1 hour and a half ago because you were here already. But still, I mean, I want to be wise and respectable of anybody. If anybody ever watches 2 hours, they will not even look at it. So.
Okay, it's up to you. So you think we should reconvene some other time? There's only 3 more questions, so I don't know how much we'll.
Are they short? Say them. Just say them. Let's see.
One is what language have you used? have you learned to use when talking about the conflict, and how has it changed? How have you changed your language? Should I say all three? What do you think your side could have done to better avoid the conflict, help avoid the conflict? And what do you think your side should apologize for?
Okay, I heard the last one. Should apologize for my side, and what was the first? Because I had
one was, how have you learned over the course of your work being engaged with the other side? How have you changed the language that you use when you talk about the conflict? How have you adjusted?
How do I change? It's very long, amazing questions. I wish we can convene another time. They're very beautiful questions. I don't think we should.
Okay.
If it's okay with you.
Fair enough. We'll convene and we'll focus.
Take another like 30 minutes or something that are like cute and nice and deep.
Fine.
Okay.
We'll find another time. Okay. So you're gonna get going. You've got to run.
Yes.
Okay, so you run. I'll see if there's any. Does anybody have any questions? Last final question for me before we're signing off.
Oh, I can stay a bit for questions, but I mean, I wanted to end out of respect to the. Not because my time is too tight, as much as I felt 2 hours. It looks like, like for people. Is there anybody even having any questions? I don't know.
I don't know. We've got 67 viewers still on.
70. Okay, you want to go? I see a lot of comments. I don't know if those are you take the lead. You're the leader.
Okay. Liam O'Donnell is asking, Rafi, keep going. Zohar says, Rafi, keep going.
Keep going, Rafi, keep going.
Thank you, thank you. Zangri says, who do you point the finger at for a change? I mean, it's sort of like what that's part of the question. Who started the conflict or whose fault it is? I think for change, I think you need two sides. I, as an individual, I can only change myself. I can't change Malkon. I can try to convince him, but I can only change Rafi. That's the complexity of life. When you have when you're in a conflict with an individual or even a friendship or relationship, you need to focus on you. But hopefully they're also focusing on themselves, because you can't dance by yourself, as you know, it's Malkon who dances. But no, it takes two to tango. One is this one state versus two state solution. I mean, so Malkon likes two state solution and Rafi likes one state solution.
Oh, wait, Rafi. You want me to comment on the first question?
Oh, yes, please comment. Who do you point the finger at for change?
For change?
Yeah, whose job is it to make the change?
Okay, for change, because we are not equal parties, I would say mainly foremost, not only Israel, because they can change the situation way faster than a Palestinian victim, weaker party, although it doesn't mean we're always weaker. We're always victims. Sometimes we also oppress Israelis, such as missiles killing innocent civilian Israelis. But I'm saying, in general, it's in the hand of the powerful, and that's how it works. So this is my main answer. Who started the conflict? To us Palestinians, a Zionist movement started the conflict, as in instigating. It doesn't mean that only Zionists are responsible for what happened after, because it's always a two-way to go. But instigating, yeah, because Jews always existed here. There was no conflict with the Palestinian Christian, Muslim, Jew. There was no main conflict of existential threat of, like everybody abuses everybody from time to time, because people are different. Minorities usually suffer like Christians. We always suffer in the Arab world because we're minority. Not because Muslims hate us so much, or not because there's an existential issue like, we can never exist together. No, that's how minorities suffer, because they're weaker. That's the psychology of minorities. And because the majority is stronger, sometimes they abuse this power. Okay, so this is just important to read the psychology of all of those elements, and I think it answers. I don't know if you may allow me, Rafi, after your permission, it just came up to me. I don't know if it's the next question. Like somebody was saying, how come Malkon is not like he's so quickly and easily to forgive the Turks that actually performed genocide on his people, and still deny it to this day, but he said he will never forgive Israel.
Okay, I don't find that one. I want to show it.
Like, I don't know how I got here. It's the very, by the way, it's around the end. I just, by mistake. Is it okay to answer this quickly and then go back to
answer? Yeah, I'm looking for it.
But sorry, it was in front of me just because somebody's heavily, cynically criticizing me. I hear you.
Yeah, so, take him down.
Miss Noam. Noam is a guy, maybe it's a guy. Or a girl. Forgive me if I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of those names.
So Noam, forgiveness is something, and forgetting or letting go of your right is something else. For example, let's say you slap me on my face. If you tell me, please forgive me, I might forgive you. Does it mean I will let go of the right to not be slapped on my face again by you? So the genocide is denied. I need the right of recognition. Does it mean I hate the Turks inside of me? Or I am not forgiving the Israelis who kill us daily, in our opinion at least, or abuse us daily? No. We need to, forgiving the Jews is my responsibility, or Israel. It doesn't mean I will let go of the right to stop the abuse that is causing the lack of, or the hurt that needs forgiveness. Okay, so for example, I'll give you an example. Allow me also, because I believe in this guy, Jesus, if you allow me. So Jesus, the guy who was crucified for no reason. And by the way, don't get me wrong, this may be provocative to everybody who's hearing me who's a Jew. And please don't use anti-Semitic notion to stereotype me here, including Rafi himself. The Jews never admitted to killing an innocent man 2,000 years ago. His name is Jesus. Until today. And never admitted to persecuting the first believers in Jesus Christ, the first church we call it, almost annihilating the church in 66 AD fully. And speaking in the region of here, Palestine. Never admitted until today, never apologized. Whereas we have a 20th century Germany apologized for a current Holocaust. But the Jews 2,000 years ago who claimed to be, which is true, Jews, victims of certain historical different nations persecuting them, yet they never admit, let alone admitting to the Palestinian oppression they're doing against us, I mean, Israeli oppression against Palestinians. They never admitted to have killed an innocent man and an innocent people group who never did any crimes. Only they had different spiritual beliefs. And Jesus, on the cross, he forgave his oppressors. Yet he said it's a sin. He didn't say, oh, it's okay now to crucify me. But he said, forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they're doing. Forgiveness is a layer of the heart. Right, or having a right, is a continuous fight. Those are two different things. But some people, of course, cannot forgive and yet look for the right. And that's needs emotional maturity or emotional, let's say, depth. Thank you, though. I know you're saying it in a very cynical manner, but I wish I at least honored and respected that you're raising it.
Okay, there was a question for me. Rafi, do you blame the Bibi government for delaying any efforts in the past year? Yeah, I think the right-wing government in Israel has not made any steps towards a peaceful resolution. That seems pretty obvious. You know, no, they have no interest in making a two-state solution. Certainly, I was sort of hopeful that they would actually annex the entire Area C, so that would then the international community would force us into a one-state solution. But they somehow avoided that by making peace with the United Arab Emirates. Bibi is a genius for avoiding getting out of this conflict. He's like that kid who never wants to do his homework and finding all kinds of excuses. My dog ate it, I had to go to the doctor. Whatever it is, Bibi is getting out of resolving this conflict. He is a professional conflict avoider or conflict ending avoider.
Thank you.
So that's how I feel. There was a question for both of us. Do you have hope for a new government in Israel? No, no. No, there's going to be another election. The whole system is terribly broken in Israel. This is I hate to say it. I don't have faith. That's why I'm trying to try to start political revolution in thought. Peaceful political revolution. We need serious change in the way we view how we do our government here and how we think about this situation. I don't see change just under the current mind frame of everybody and the current political system we have here. It's pretty hopeful. So the other part was for you, Malkon. Do you have hope for a possible election in the Palestinian Authority?
So Nathaniel Hohauser, how are you? So do I have? Yes. The reading of it today is definitely way more hopeful. It's being pushed away by Mahmoud Abbas in particular, as some analysts see it. But yes, there is hope for elections in the PA. By the way, our hope does not lie in the elections. Unfortunately, our hope lies in, of course, our unity that would lead to healthy elections, but then in our unity of resisting an occupational system. The elections and even our unity, that we don't have enough authority, even after even if the elections go, to do much, except mainly to strategize a healthy, for me, I wish, peaceful resistance strategies that would bring a long-term kind of healthy outcomes towards the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Okay, I wish I answered you.
Fantastic. I'll see if there's maybe one more question, and then we'll and we can move to an after party, a quick after party if people want.
How do you decide on the number of questions, if I may ask you, Rafi?
What, for how many questions we're doing now?
Like, yeah, how do you
also, or the framework of 10 questions or 20 questions?
Okay, we can, like, if you want.
There was 20 questions was a show originally that Danny and Zahir did. So I repeated the format. Me and you were doing like a second version.
Right.
And then, so that was the 20 questions was sort of the name of the show.
No, but I'm saying the number of questions by people now.
Oh, we can decide to cut it off. You see the questions here, right? So we can.
I see, yes, but I see a lot of comments. Wait, you don't know.
You see one that's good. That looks like it's worth our time.
I need to read a lot to see, but maybe you're more focused on seeing the questions. But yeah, sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What would you guys say to the British who caused this problem? How do you feel about the British?
What did you guys say to the British? Okay, you wanna go first? But somebody was asking.
I am not of the opinion that I want to overly blame the British. I feel like that's deflecting. I know a lot of people do, and they try to say we would have all just been great friends if only the British hadn't screwed everything up, and they promised it to you and promised you. That's a way to avoid responsibility, I think. Yes, the British played their part here, and like they did in many countries, they colonized. They had won this after World War I. Were they justified? I don't know. But they created this mandate for Palestine and they divided off Jordan, and they said Jordan would be an independent country, the emirate of the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, of Transjordan. And then they had a mandate for Palestine to create both a Jewish homeland and a country where everyone would have equal rights. And so they failed in their job to effectively do that, what the League of Nations entrusted them to do. And they sort of left a mess. Was it all their fault? I don't know. The Jewish Zionists and the Arabs, the Palestinians were murdering each other over the course of about 28 years from the time the mandate started up until 1948 when the British left. So how much motivation did the British have to really solve all our problems? It's really not the British's problems to solve all our problems. They left. The Jews were attacking them. The Arabs may have attacked them. They were attacking each other. They walked away. And here we are left. And the British have left 73 years ago. The British have left. So we need to figure out what we're going to do. The British aren't here anymore to blaming them doesn't really help. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with the premise. Not taking responsibility by blaming them, if that's where the blame is coming from. But how much does the British hold responsibility? Very big. And by the way, for those who don't know, Christian Zionism, for those who are asking if I'm Christian or Muslim, I would be very surprised. All of this I'm telling you about Jesus, you didn't yet figure out who's Muslim or if I'm a Christian or Muslim. Of course I'm a Christian. But just to say, British, and for those who don't know how the West was affected by Zionism much, one of the factors is Christian Zionism that preceded, by the way, Jewish Zionism. It started in 1836 AD by something called dispensationalism. Dispensationalism was a doctrine, not to make it too complicated for the hearers, that believes that God has still different dispensations and two major plans. One for physical Jews, earthly Jews, like the beautiful guy here that you see next to me, and one for spiritual, we call it Jews, who are the Christians. We are spiritual Jews. Those are earthly Jews. Yeah, you see how we tease each other. Okay, now this is the Christian philosophy that appeared from a guy named John Nelson Darby, a British from some Irish origin. They believed that the Messiah would come back if we gather the Jews back to Palestine. This is how Jesus would be convinced to come back. It seems he's too late because he's not yet convinced in some Christian eyes. Very funny to us today, at least Palestinian Christians. We call this a false doctrine. Now, guess what? Balfour and Lord and other people who were in big administrative political positions. Balfour himself in 1906, he was the prime minister before he was Secretary of State. They were Christian Zionists. They believed in this. So they hold today a theological kind of, you can call it ethical, divine responsibility, false divine ethical responsibility. And then they misrepresented Christianity, so they did harm not only to Palestine, they did harm to all Christianity, to Jesus himself. They promoted death, bloodshed, occupation, colonization. Until today, the biggest issue of British, for the Hassanain, I think, who said, Hassanain Kifa, if you speak Arabic, for the big problem with British today that they never confess, they never admit. Even the Hamas recently asked them to apologize for the Balfour Declaration. They said, no way. We're so proud, we promised the Jews a homeland. So this is, of course, they hold a lot of responsibility in that regard. So definitely they should be held responsible. They should be the main ones who would bring a certain layer of mediation rather than the US who are completely favoring Israel, but they should apologize, say, let's please find the solution. They should focus on particularly the Palestinians to honor who they are and compensate them for all those abusive years they have been facing until today. Okay, and more goes on, but it's a lot.
Sure, I think the Balfour Declaration is not that bad. If we just did the Balfour Declaration, we'd be in better shape. If we had one country that was home of the Jews and had equal rights for everybody, that's not so bad. At least do that. Anyways, Danny, maybe that's the last question. This is a good one. For both of us, what made you look past the ugly and painful history between the two and start activism for coexistence, especially after the last war? Is coexistence possible?
No, it's not possible. Go
forget it, man.
You can go first.
Mush mumkin. I think we can. I started getting into it because, I didn't grow up here as a child. If you catch the first episode, so I didn't really have the experience, at least so much. I was here occasionally as a small child to feel the conflict in firsthand. So I didn't have like fear of Arab people walking around, and I didn't grow up with that sort of ingrained idea. And then I experienced when I lived here, maybe when I was 18, I experienced the first Intifada or the second Intifada. I'm not that old. No, I experienced the second Intifada at age 18, and I saw that there's the real problems here. It's the land that I've grown up my whole life and wanting to be a part of, and all of a sudden there's disaster here. People are murdering each other over wanting to be in control and wanting supremacy. It doesn't make any sense. Why don't you just find a way to get along, guys. So that's I'm on one hand, I'm both an insider. I'm a Jew. This is my history. This is the land of my heritage. This is the land that we've dreamed about living in. And I'm sort of I didn't grow up hating either side. I was like, yo, guys, chill out, man. Like, there's worse conflicts in the world that have been solved, and you guys can do it too. We can do it. So that's why I believe, and I think coexistence is the only option. The last war was the stupidest war I've ever seen in my life. It was a war that nobody wanted to start, and people were too proud to end. It was for nothing. People died for no gain. It's just unbelievable. You know, they were upset over 28 houses to kick people, and then a riot started, and a tree was set on fire. It's like a comic book. And then they shot some missiles that didn't hit anybody. And then and then once they said, oh, you shot missiles, that's it, I'll shoot more missiles. Oh, look what I can do. And then they're both just like flexing for nothing. And then they ended it anyways. They were going to end it anyways the first day. They were Hamas was calling for a ceasefire. Israel was like, I'm not agreeing with ceasefire. Let's hit them hard this time. And it'll take a year. They have a million people workforce. How long does it take to build 4,000 more rockets? It's ridiculous with 1 million laborers. This is a waste of time. So of course coexistence is the only solution. And this tantruming, this fighting is just postponing that. What do you think?
First, I disagree with Rafi as usual. We have to disagree. Well, Danielle, I would just use different semantics for myself. I don't believe in coexistence. I believe in co-resistance. It's not about coexisting. It's rather co-resisting what's not allowing us to coexist. And then we will coexist naturally. It will flow. Coexistence is a flow of co-resistance. Without resisting oppression, injustice, especially powerful regimes such as Israel that's based on discrimination, then we cannot coexist, even if we pretend to hug each other. That's not actually the coexistence that any humans would look for. It's not a mere hug, okay? What made me, in short, I'll share with you very shortly. I was an atheist before. So a lot of my beliefs today stem from a spiritual experience I had. I technically had a powerful encounter with what I believe to be the creator, the founder of life, the lover of humanity. And since then, that creator who changed my heart, he expressed to me how much he loves me, although I don't deserve necessarily, although I'm not too good to be loved necessarily, or I don't have enough good works or good deeds, but that he was willing to me, to my understanding today, to die on the cross. To me, that is God incarnate, the creator of the humankind, who came to show his love for the human race and died for his own very creation, who refused his very own love and creation. This is the person who changed my life. And from that, I started believing in ultimate love that leads to ultimate justice that would definitely naturally flow into true peace that people are looking for. You know, peace, even the word in Hebrew, because the Bible, Old Testament we call, or Tanakh for the Jews, written in Hebrew, shalom, the word means fullness. Peace means fullness and full connection. And that's the peace that I found. It's a full connection, I call it vertical connection, with the founder, creator of my soul. And so I can live with ultimately a hope for a full connection horizontally with those who I am identified with. And any human fellow identifies my human identity. Let me just share an example of what I mean by this and finish. If I live in the desert without ever meeting any human species, I would never even know if I'm a human or not. I would not know my species. But I have discovered my species or my type because I met with Rafi. Because his brotherhood, for example, gave me meaning to my brotherhood. I am a son because I had a father or I have a mother today. And I am a husband if I have a wife. She is a wife because she has a husband. I defined her wifehood, so to speak. She defined my husbandhood, so to speak. We define each other so fundamentally, yet we're so absent from that, and we think, oh, I don't need you kind of thing. We're walking around, well, I don't need other humans. Oh, I'm just going to live on my own. And that's what I call unethical Western individualistic selfishness, which the culture of a Westernization is proud of. It's too individualistic, selfish, me. Oh, I have this boundary, I have that boundary. They're afraid to hug now that people wouldn't think if two guys are homosexuals. I mean, so individualism gets into weird places. And that's selfishness. If we just realize that we were meant to be family, not individual. We are individuals, but the purpose of our existence is to be family. Not we exist as family and the purpose is to be individual, separate ones. Like the West. Oh, if you're 18, you have to leave my house. Really? But I love you. You're my father. Why do I need to leave if I'm 18? I would leave if it's my own will, but why do we kick me out even? What the heck is this family system? And that's why we have way more family issues in the West than the East. That's the beauty of our Middle Eastern culture. One beauty. We have a lot of issues. I'm not saying we're better. But in that regard, yes, we have some better principles of love and acceptance. So yes, that's what would change me or make me want to co-resist with my Jewish fellow, unfortunately, enemy, more powerful than me, and believe in them, in him and her, and yet have to face racism on a daily basis and discrimination, to say the least. Let alone myself face being shot at least twice, almost killed and lost my whole life. Let alone being few times armies gathering, armies is not the right, I mean a bunch of the army people gathering around me to beat me up twice in my childhood. And a few other more severe stuff that happened today. So yes, this is why I believe in this, because I was forgiven and I don't deserve it. And I do believe if I don't deserve it, then I can give forgiveness as well. If I didn't deserve it, then why others wouldn't also get the forgiveness if they don't deserve it? We're all the same kind of made up what we're made up from. Thank you. But Rafi is the boss. He decides when to finish the questions.
Okay, that's fine. I say let's meet up again sometime.
I like the questions more than us just talking. I mean, we're not just talking, but I mean, like, because I want to ask
people's questions. You want to find another one? You can pick one. You see, I don't know if you are able to pick stuff.
Okay, do I want to find another one? Somebody
asked if you identify as Arabic, as Arab. I mean,
yes, I can answer that. Do I identify as an Arab? Maybe I already mentioned my philosophy on identity now, my connection or relationship to my other fellow human. So do I identify as German if I was born in Germany? Yes, even if my ethnic blood is not, because I would love the German people. If I'm back into my human nature, if I'm back into my humanity, I would identify as part of the people that I'm part of, speaking their language and living their culture. Out of at least honoring the least of them to be part of them. To say I'm an Arab, of course, with pride. I don't have almost any Arab origin. My grandmother is Aramaean, which means Syriac. For those who don't know neither words, it's the ancestors of Abraham himself, the prophet in the Bible and in the Quran. Aramaic people were from Iraq originally. They're not Arabs. They're the ancestors of the Arabs and the Jews. This is my grandmother. My grandfather is Armenian, which is not Aramaean. Aramaeans speak Aramaic. Armenians speak Armenian. Very different people groups. Armenians, we are the ancestors, or they call us the Caucasians, the first Caucasus. That's why our area, Armenia, is called Caucasus, which means the first white-skinned people in the world, for those who don't know. Then, my mother is Egyptian Coptic. Copts are the ancient Egyptians, and they're not Arabs neither. Today, Egyptians are Arabized, and that's a pride. That's not a curse. Yes, my mom is Arabic in that sense, but not ethnically.
Okay. There was a question for me. I mean, I don't identify as an Arab, although I speak some Arabic, like Malkon does. But Malkon, have you lost connection here? He's frozen. Yeah, Malkon seems to have frozen. I don't know where. We seem to have lost him. Maybe it's a good time to end in a little bit. But I will answer Zohar's question. I like Zohar. Why do you think Israel should be a state? Do you think Israel should be a state of Jews or a Jewish state? It's a nation-state law. I mean, that's complicated. It depends how we're doing it. I believe that this land, the land that I call Israel, maybe I can bring Malkon back. Add to stream. Malkon, are you there?
Yes. Continue if you want.
Okay, I'm answering Zohar's question. So he says, do I think Israel should be a state of the Jews or a Jewish state? So this land to me is the, I'm getting a phone call. Is that this land is the land of Israel to me. And it's the land of the origin of the Jewish people. I don't agree with the nation state law. I don't like the idea that you create a law that doesn't exist in the concept of international law, that only one ethnicity has national rights in a country. That's not even a thing. Israel is ratified and is signatory on the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, Universal Covenant of it. This says that every person has a right to participate in the politics of their country, and that everyone has the right to vote and be represented. So it doesn't really make sense what that means to me. So I think Israel as a country Israel is the land that the Jewish people originate from, and that it can also be the homeland of the Jewish people and the land of equality, where everyone who lives here. So that's sort of how I see it. Is there any more questions? Maybe we should end it. I see Malkon was here. Malkon, are you around?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's about time to wrap up.
Of course. I was listening to you, but I just had to turn off the camera. So you said it should not, or I don't want to reiterate, but I
don't see that it should be I don't think of it as the Jewish state. It's the state that is homeland of the Jews, or the country, and it's in my vision it should be one country that is homeland of the Jews and homeland of the Palestinians, and we should find a way to make that work. But we definitely have very ancient cultural origins here. There's a lot of you turn around in every twist and turn. We have a story. We have a story of every rock and tree and valley. This is the place that we have roots. But that doesn't mean that you should be second class because you're also here. That doesn't make sense to me. And I don't want people, if this is my home, I don't want people in my home to feel like they're not welcome here.
Thank you, Mom. And
sure.
Rafi, I know it's up to you to decide, but if we can have just maybe very few more questions. I like this more time a lot because I like to honor, as I said, people's asking.
Sure.
Give them but if you allow me to finish on the Arab thing, it was the last sentence before it was cut off.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just saying, so belonging to me is above blood. And we are not mainly defined by ethnic blood, rather by relational love. That's it. So that's where being an Arab would be something that definitely I would identify with proudly.
Fantastic. Do you see any other questions you like?
Let me see.
There's one about would a Palestine country not be an ethno-state? Would Jews have full rights there in a two-state solution? So I guess this is for you, who believes in a two-state solution. Would Jews have full rights in the state of Palestine, in your vision, if we had two states?
In my vision, yes, why not?
Sure. I would think so. I would hope so.
But in practice, are we gonna give at least at the social level? Not let's say the legal level is supposedly they have full rights. At the social level, are people gonna react to those settlers and associate them with people who have been killing our people since 1948? Very hard. Some people may be over it, like me. Not even to claim myself, like even me, but I'm just saying, like, it's very hard emotionally. Are the settlers themselves gonna treat us equally at the social level? I highly doubt, even if they don't have the power. Unfortunately, I would say, with my respect to many settlers who are exceptional yet, settlers didn't come in humbly, many of them, if not most. Some would argue even all. They came in by force, kicking out others, expelling them, stealing their land or buying their land in manipulative manners, and they know it, like falsifying papers and documents and tabu. Tabu, it means in Turkish, the ownership and landlord, not taboo in English. Like, so they didn't come with this humble attitude. Oh, now I love my Palestinian neighbors. They might become more and more bubbled up, like they were sometimes in some Western countries, to protect each other, and which would not create much actually equality. They would make themselves also feel, again, like victims and minority. But yeah, it's not. It's not. I don't think it's an impossibility at the legal level. If we reach a solution, it's not, because Palestinians, we will be still the weaker country. We will not look now for new issues with Israel. Oh, let's abuse now the settlers, and wait for the army suddenly to invade again our new country. So we don't have that privilege to even abuse them. So they will definitely have way more rights than expected of a Palestinian, even since 1948, living in Israel, having a citizenship until now. But at the social level, yeah, it might be different. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but that's how I see some, at least, form of.
Okay, Noam's asking, who do you define as settlers? Because most of Palestinians define every Jew living anywhere as settlers. I'd assume you don't think this. Because when you say settlers, you're talking about like our friend Yishai and Yehuda Cohen and some of the other guys. The Jews in the West Bank, you mean?
You're asking me, or you're talking to him?
All right, that's what I think. Sorry, I shouldn't speak for you, right?
No, go.
Right, so I assume when I'm saying settlers, although I try not to, I know some of my Jewish friends don't like this term. They'll say Jewish residents of Judea and Samaria. But I know within the modern terminology, it's usually referring to Jews who live in the West Bank. I don't tend to think, as personally Israeli, the Jews who live in parts of East Jerusalem, I mean, maybe in the Arab neighborhoods, I would think of them as settlers. Like if a Jew living in Sheikh Jarrah, that's kind of like a settler. But a Jew, let's say, living in Gilo or living in Ramot, that's sort of like an Israeli, and that's they don't live the lifestyle of a settler. They're living. If you live within the wall, you're not really you're not a real settler. You don't really get your settler card. You're just an Israeli, and they live on the over the green line, which is an imaginary line,
Okay. So Noam, I'm laughing because you have such amazing provocative question. Before you ask me about Turkey and the forgiveness. Okay. Yeah. So all Palestinians, or most Palestinians, you said, define every Jew living anywhere on the land as a settler. You're right. Not most, but you're right. We might define, Palestinians might define most Jews, not every Jews, as settlers. You'll be surprised, actually, that many Palestinians don't even define the ones who came in 1948 as settlers. Anyway, for legality's sake, A settler, as Rafi was explaining, although he didn't explain exactly the legality of it, but he's referring to that. Legality means those who came after 1967, formed a settlement in different manners now and ways. I'm not going to go into it, like calling a Palestinian land a nature reserve or a shooting area, army, a practice area, taking it by force, or even buying sometimes in twisted manners, or even buying for real from different people. So calling those settlers according to legality, because it's illegal to move, to transfer your own population according to the Geneva Conventions, the fourth Geneva Convention, to transfer your population as an occupying power to the region you're occupying. Now you tell me, but we are Jews, we're not occupying, this is our historic region. Well, if Romans come back here and say, well, so we were also here, and the Greeks come here also, we were also here. So if we come now and take Bethlehem and call it Greece, do you think this is not an occupation? But we were in Bethlehem for thousands of years. What about the Persians who were here even longer? What about the Egyptians who were even here before? What about, you name it, Ottomans who were here 400 years? Like even recently, Erdogan, a cool dude. Jerusalem is ours, he said. So what about all of those people claiming? Yes, so illegality in the sense, settler in the sense of law. Last but not, do I think every Jew here is a settler? Every is always the wrong word. Do I think most Jews who came from Europe are settlers? Yes. In definition, historically, yes. Today, do I look at them as settlers? Practically no, because it doesn't help me. But
most of them were born here.
Sorry?
Most Israelis, the majority of them were born in Israel already.
Yes,
this is their life.
Exactly, but the origin was a settler colonial movement, and who called it the settler colonial movement? The founders of Zionism. Proudly, they said we are a settler colonial movement. Well, they didn't say, "Oh, we're not settlers, we're not colonialists. Oh, we are peaceful people coming to take it by peace." They didn't say that. Just for Jewish audience who don't know this, go check out quotes from Ben Gurion, from others, even before, and Herzl, and this was a very outspoken sentiment, and they were proud of, because why? Because that was they were trying to please the Western audience, and the Western powers were colonialists, and colonization was as if the language of the powerful. It was a very healthy kind of cool thing to associate yourself with.
Right.
Okay? It was not like, oh, this is bad. Like today we're discovering it's bad, because now we're realizing our humanity. We're more in touch now with ethics in those days. I hope.
We would like to think so.
Would like to think so, yes, as Rafi said.
Okay, so you, I think it's about time to wrap up. Do you have any final thoughts?
One last question, Rafi, please.
One last question. Are you having a good time? Okay, let's see if we can find somebody good. Give me a question. Let me give me like a.
Somebody's saying, I'm just going to give this man back to my about how entertaining that is. You could say there's an elite government. Eli says no, so it wasn't really a settler colonial movement. Well, they said it was a settler colonial movement to the founders themselves. Well, if you want to argue,
sure. Right. I don't think of it that way myself now, but I mean, I just got on an airplane and came here, and it already existed when I came here, but that's my personal experience. Somebody had some kind of question. Does any Israeli does not support the occupation and settler expansion and anti-Semite? This doesn't even make sense, but does not. Are you saying that if an Israeli doesn't support the occupation, then I'm an anti-Semite? No, I don't support the occupation. If it depends what you mean by the occupation. I think if Israel's going to have presence in the West Bank, we need to give civil rights and equal rights to everyone who lives there. If you want to go from the perspective that the mandate was all really meant to be one country, the Palestinians never agreed to partition it, so it's one country. So give everyone citizenship and we'll all be equals in our country. Then that's fine. But if you think that I support occupying and expanding settlements while non-Jews do not have civil rights in the West Bank, no, I think that's immoral. We need to stop that. We either need to give everyone equality or make one country together, or we need to divide the authority along some kind of line so that there's two countries and each country elects their government so that people represent them in the place that they live. The people that control their lives, they have to get the power to vote for, and they have a say. So we need democracy here and freedom. So I support democracy and freedom, and I'm not an anti-Semite because I like myself and I like my Jewish friends and relatives, and I think that you're supporting equality and freedom is a very Jewish value. So I don't agree with this statement.
By the way, just for Liam, I hope the language in the chat doesn't become very abusive. I don't know who is saying what to who. I don't want to assume. We love you guys. We ask you to keep it respectable, but this is up to you. You're mature adults. Just to give a bit of history to anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism keeps changing definition. Like if you also, I mentioned Norman Finkelstein, this is the third time I mention it. He writes a whole book on the industry of the Holocaust, and he also writes a whole stuff on the new type of anti-Semitism that keeps arising every few decades. And so anti-Semitism historically was actually the very essence of Zionism. Zionism was the biggest anti-Semite movement regarding, bear with me, depending on the definition of anti-Semitism historically, because anti-Semitism at the time was meant to get Jews out of Europe. So moving Jews out of Europe to Palestine was a very big anti-Semite movement. And then anti-Semitism changed into, today it's the newest one. It's anybody who even criticizes the government.
Israel. People who criticize Israel or the Jewish state
or opposes the Jewish state. So every time there's like an anti-Semite new definition of, like Zionism. It's a movable type of definition. Like Noam Chomsky says, you can't deal with the concept that keeps changing. It's like it's like an unstable human. So it's shallow and so anti-Semitism. Whoever wants to just stereotype, not stereotype. So actually, Zionists were the biggest anti-Semite. That's why the British were anti-Semites, because they wanted to move the Jews out of Europe to Palestine. But now the British sound looks good when they wanted to promise Palestine. So it depends who you look with, which eyes. It's just healthy to keep this in mind regarding the history of it and how those things are played out with, and how anti-Semitism, maybe last thing to say, has a lot of leverage and weight in law because of the Holocaust and what they kind of made policies regarding the Holocaust. Today, no offense, of course, I sympathize with the Holocaust. But if any person today in Europe, certain areas such as Norway, Canada, US, and many others, if you want to do something academic called revision of the Holocaust, meaning you want to revise what happened exactly, and maybe you're open to changing your opinion about the details or about the event, you are put in prison. So you're not even allowed to revise the Holocaust, whereas our Armenian genocide is denied daily. Nobody gets into prison. And by the way, I don't believe that should anybody get in, because if I have the truth, I would never be afraid that people would tell me, oh, it didn't happen. I just had a new friend tell me, oh, the genocide didn't happen. You actually were the guys who killed 1 million Turks, but you fled and you're trying to look like victims today. I'm like, wow, you realize, wow, you're very, like, you inspire me, man. Like, you don't even know any Turkish guy and you're telling me this, and you have an Armenian friend and you're denying my genocide. Sure, okay, good for you. So what I'm trying to say, this weight, we need to reason. If I mention the Holocaust today among Europeans, it's like religion. Like, no, we can't talk about it. Oh. If I mention the Armenian genocide, we're like cheap. If I mention Palestinian massacres, we're like nobody. So this is also another way. I'm not saying, again, Holocaust. I'm not arguing Holocaust happened or didn't happen. I'm just saying the way we value today this anti-Semitism umbrella that came from the Holocaust umbrella into the Jewish supremacy, Israeli Zionist umbrella of government. It's all stemming from a lot of those stuff. And there's a lot of abuse of intellectual freedom. Many academics of Canada, like objective, they didn't have anything against the Jews, were put in prison for revising the Holocaust and coming to different conclusions that yes, the Holocaust happened, but not in the way that it's presented. It's exaggerated in some forms, in some numbers, or in some way, and so on and so forth. I'll be very hated when I say that because Palestinian would naturally say this because no, I'm not against anything to do. I wouldn't just like belittle the misery of the Jews to make them look bad because they're today oppressing us. There's no need for this. If Armenians today are abusing some people, I wouldn't, like those other people should not minimize the Armenian genocide in order to, of course, they may tend to do that. But this is not my ethics. I don't believe it will help me. It actually would make me sound more noble if I admit everybody's suffering. And that's also what I'm aspiring to, because I believe in truth. At least I claim to say that. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Okay, Malkon, any final words, or we'll try to finish those last 3 questions. They were good. We'll do a final round, and maybe we'll answer some people's questions again.
Yes.
Next time. We ran long. This is almost 3 hours. It was a great time.
Yeah, that's it. It's 3 hours.
Yeah.
Rafi, after your permission, very, very last comment. Some people who are telling me, how am I comparing Palestinian massacres to Holocaust or Armenian genocide because of the measure? All of those are abuse, tragedies. Even if one soul is killed, I can compare it to 1 million who are killed. I'm not saying they are the same measure of tragic events, but those are very immoral and they should be admitted, compensated for. The policy should be applied to them. A massacre of 6, 7 children and 2 women should be having compensated for, like we have a massacre of a whole family of 9 people in Gaza or more just in last bombing. Complete innocent people should be compensated for, admitted. Yes, it's not in the same measure. That's not a competition of who's more victim here. That's stupid. That's inhumane to think of this term. Or start saying, because the bigger number, they're more important than the smaller number who have been killed. So it's okay to kill the smaller number. It's okay. And I don't think the person who's asking saying is okay, but those questions also undermine your intellect, your intelligence, and your emotional human intelligence. Okay, thank you guys for listening. We have to go, but thank you for.
It was a pleasure. It was nice hearing you. Thank you everyone for coming. You guys can do an after party. I don't think I've got to go. I thought we would finish at 7:30, not 8:30. I thought I'd give him an hour, but I feel like it's about time for me to get going. We'll be in touch. We'll do stuff again.
Yes, thank you. We'll be in touch, Rafi. Thanks to you.
Bye. Bye, guys. Thanks.